Disturbance. We welcome everyone to attend our council meetings, but we all need to be here in a respectful manner and conduct ourselves in a respectful manner. So I'm sorry our meeting was disturbed this evening in that way. I'll now call on the next question, which is from Michael Brennan from Reservoir. Are you here?
Thank you very much. It probably was in such a subconscious mood that I posed a question, was that if you were councillors in Richmond and in the suburbia, would you have the temerity to put a kindergarten hub in the Botanical Gardens? That's question one. The second question was, tied up with that this is, in fact, the Ruthven site is, in fact, our Ruthven Botanical Gardens. And we have the same respect for that as the whole country has for our botanical gardens as instigated by Hoddle many, many years ago. So I was anticipating that today it's so important to us that we compare it to the central botanical gardens in the city.
Thank you.
I know it's hypothetical, but I'm just trying to stress the importance to you as we see it.
Yeah. Thank you for your question. As you know, we are considering a report on this tonight, and so I'll take it more of the question as more as a statement, as that you do not want an early learning centre built on that site, but I can't really respond to the question on what will happen until we have had that debate and make that decision. Thank you. The next question is from Anne Labour.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. Anne Labour from Northcote. My question 1 relates to item 8.4, the food waste and rubbish collection. The food waste trial was successful and is welcome. My question is, however, will the council advise whether it intends to reduce rubbish collections to fortnightly, and if so, will there be a subsequent reduction in rates, which I believe is only fair?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for your question. I'm really pleased to hear about the results of the trial too. It has allowed us to turn residents' food waste into compost and mulch for farmers instead of going to landfill, which is a really great outcome. At the moment, our plans are to continue rubbish collections weekly. However, as you know, we are currently reviewing our waste strategy to look at the options to reduce waste, to improve our services and to significantly cut greenhouse gas emissions. We know that right now we send more than half of all of the waste we collect from households to landfill, and that's too much. And a lot of this waste is food waste, and some of it is actually recyclable as well. So we're determined to find a better way to make recycling easier for everyone in our community. To do this, we need to do a thorough review so that we can consider all options. And so we're currently in the research phase of reviewing our waste strategy, and there will be updates in community consultation as this progresses. I can let you know that across Melbourne, the cost of waste management has been increasing for a number of years. In this year, in 2018-19, Council absorbed the additional cost within our rate cap. So we didn't pass that on to ratepayers. But I can't...
You can't answer my question.
Well, we're currently going through the waste strategy, and that will, I guess, present the options to us.
Okay, all right, thank you. My question 2 is item 11.1, the Audit Committee report. As the audit report is confidential, it is impossible to actually gauge how many items which the auditors have raised are yet to be completed at this point in time. The attached minutes of the meeting in the agenda tonight seem to indicate that there is still much to be implemented by the council, including all the waste management plans. For example, the traffic and road management, stormwater plan, the open space plan, which includes the tree register, the building asset plan, which incorporates a developer contribution plan. The council also haven't finished implementing improvements and changes to policies and procedures, uses of technology, data collection, the role of local laws, the bond process, debtor management controls, purchase card controls, and the complaints process. The outcomes of the audit are important, as I believe it lets the community know how well the council is run and if there are any concerns relating to governance. The minutes of the audit indicated that the internal auditor contract period has been concluded and that a tender for a new provider has been drawn up. My question is, how many items are yet to be resolved? Has a new auditor been appointed? And will the council release the audit report, please?
Okay, thank you for that question. In June, a regular report outlining outstanding audit actions was provided to the Audit Committee. This is not available for release. At that time, a total of 50 open internal audit recommendations existed across many audits. The request for tender for the provision of audit services has been advertised and it closes on the 23rd of November, so in a few weeks' time, and is expected that a new internal auditor will be appointed early in the new year, in 2019.
All right, thank you. I have a submission to make. Can I make it now or do you want me to wait till the item comes up?
Are you happy to wait? You've got a couple, that's all. Yeah. We have a number of submitters on that item, so I was hoping to do that at the start of the item.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. The next question is from Andrew Barrett.
Thank you, Mayor and fellow councillors. My question is about item 8.3 on the agenda, aged care and the National Competition Policy. We understand that the council has had legal advice about the so-called competitive neutrality principles that may be starting to apply in the future, which may mean that the council will be in competition with private providers. We welcome the fact that the council has written to the powers that be regarding this and seeking to gain an exemption for council-run programs. My question is, if the exemption isn't given, will the council consider setting themselves up as a provider in its own right to continue at a cost-effective rate insofar as possible?
Thank you for your question. The short answer to your question is that Council will make a decision about the future of aged care service provision in 2019, and we can't preempt the decision at this stage. But I can reassure you that the possibility of Durban Council continuing as a service provider is definitely being considered. The longer answer is you probably know that in May 2018, this year, Council commissioned the Age Friendly Durban Review. This review was in response to the federal government reforms to the funding of aged care services, reforms which are currently expected to take effect from mid-2020. The independent panel who are conducting the review are still engaging in consultation, and so we will not have a final report and recommendations to Council until about March or April of 2019. So once Council has received this report, Council will make a decision at that time on our role in providing aged care services after 2020. If Council in 2019 decided to continue to be a provider of Commonwealth Home Support Program services, and if there was no state change to the application of National Competition Policy, then Council would need to carry out the National Competition Policy Public Interest Test to consider whether it was in the public interest to apply fully cost-reflective pricing, as you said. On the basis of the public interest test, Council would then decide whether full cost-reflective pricing would have to be applied to these services or not. So, in short, we can't tonight preempt Council's decision in response to the review, and we can't preempt what the outcome of that public interest test might be. Of course, in the meantime, we'll continue to provide these services to our community.
Good, thank you. My second question is about a slightly different topic. It's about the activities that we see quite frequently, particularly in Northcote, of film crews and production companies. Just a couple of weeks ago, the end of my street was not blocked off but obstructed by a range of caravans and other paraphernalia while a group were filming. It appeared at the skate park in All Nations Park. So my question is in two parts. First of all, do these activities generate any revenue for the council? And do film crews have to pay a licence fee or a one-off fee or whatever. And the second part of my question is, I guess any one of us who've seen movies or TV shows set in Melbourne these days will see an establishing shot saying we are in Melbourne, taken from Ruckers Hill. So my question is, are there any plans in place to try and preserve that view to prevent high-rise development and so forth from obscuring it or ruining it?
Mm-hmm. So in response to your first question around do we generate any revenue, there is a $324 application fee for filming which applies, and there are additional parking fees that are also applicable when they are required, so it depends on the filming and the needs of the filming in terms of parking. There were 47 applications received this year, and were generally requests for various locations, but included sites in Northcote and Fairfield. In response to the second question specifically about Ruckers Hill, I can confirm that there are provisions in place within the planning scheme to protect views from Ruckers Hill. The main way the planning scheme does this is through a design and development overlay for the Northcote Major Activity Centre. This ensures that valued public views and vistas are retained and protected from unreasonable encroachment by nearby buildings, including the view from Ruckers Hill to the central city skyline. And if you're interested in understanding this in more detail, our planning staff are happy to run it through with you.
Good, that's good news. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from Marion Harper.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and councillors. My first question is about changes to council meetings and also ward meetings, question time, genuine consultation and open meetings except where financial or personal issues are identified. The above are an integral part of the democratic process of local government and are of particular and growing importance to the community, particularly at a time when democracy in our nation is under threat. There is a growing view, according to social media comments and discussions at the Progress Association meetings, that these important forums are being undermined by council changes which will contribute to undermining our rights as citizens in a democracy. Council needs to be broadening and facilitating moves towards greater participation by the people, not less. To meet these concerns, will Council agree to implement a process in consultation with concerned ratepayers to ensure that the above are guaranteed, are conducted in an open and respectful manner, and are not diminished or changed in any way that doesn't meet with community approval and the fullest ability to participate? And will Council agree to arrange meetings with interested groups and individuals to facilitate the protection of our current processes and improved access to Council decision-making, for example, before making changes to fortnightly council meetings and ensuring that secret decision-making does not replace open government?
Thank you for your question. I'll just provide a response to some of the specific issues that you raised, ward meetings, question time, consultation. In terms of ward meetings, a schedule of all ward meetings is currently being arranged for all of next year, for all of 2019, and the dates for this will be available from next Monday. We'll be advertising these in many ways, including the Leader newspaper, in the Durban Community News and on the Durban website. So we're putting a forward agenda out now, so it's clear when more meetings will be coming up. And in terms of the ward meetings themselves, we'll conduct evaluations of these sessions on an ongoing basis to gather feedback from people who are participating to ensure that they are structured in a way that are delivering the best value to the community and they're getting what they need from them. And then in terms of public question time, as you know, the procedures for public question time are outlined within our governance local law. Council is currently reviewing this local law, and a drop-in session has been scheduled for the end of this month, the 28th of November, for members of the public to provide input into this review. So community members will also have the opportunity to comment on a draft governance local law when it is made available for public submissions in 2019. So there's a couple of opportunities to get involved in that process, and that'll be a really important piece of work. We've identified many things within our local law that needs to be improved, and so we want to hear from the community as well about that. In terms of the frequency of council meetings, council will be considering the forward schedule of meetings at tonight's meeting, so that's on the agenda. So I won't make comment on that, but I'll note that the officers have recommended that there will be no change to the current meeting cycle and that we'll continue with a 3 weekly meeting cycle, which will be debated later. In terms of transparency, based on the data on Know Your Council website, Durban City Council's performance on transparency of decision making is very strong. In last financial year, 2017-18, 4.11% of our decisions were made in committee, so in a closed meeting, compared to 7.4% for similar councils in Victoria and 9.29% for all councils in Victoria. So similar councils and all councils. But in terms of your specific concerns, my door is always open to anyone in the community who would like to have a conversation and raise any issues that they have with me at any time, whether it be an individual or a group. So I'm happy to have a conversation and meet up and hear about your concerns, because it's really important that we get this right. Thanks.
My second question deals with the housing crisis and the proposal by council, which is going to be debated tonight for Town Hall Avenue. We're all aware of the crisis of housing in Durban and across the country. Homelessness is increasing nationally. Over 105,000 people are homeless, of whom 26,000 are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, 31,000 born overseas. Single women are the fastest growing group among the homeless. Poverty is increasing. 3 million now live below the established poverty line. Women in full-time paid work still earn 14.6% less than their male counterparts, and 33% of workers on low income live in poverty. Councils, however well-meaning, can't solve the housing crisis. Housing is the responsibility of the federal government, where the main basis of taxation is collected. Not-for-profit housing is part of the whole privatisation process and serves to remove the responsibility of governments to house its people. Such programs allow state and federal governments to opt out of their role. We believe that council or public land should not be handed over to private or not-for-profit development, but should be part of a collaborative program with government for publicly owned housing. Councils should be lobbying for a genuine solution to the housing crisis. Will Durban Council undertake to implement a call through its peak bodies on the state and federal government for an urgent national summit to provide a genuine plan to end homelessness and housing poverty once and for all? Council needs to be the catalyst for a genuine national plan to meet the housing needs of the people, and not for ad hoc small proposals for social housing which will not solve the massive housing problems we face.
Thank you for the important question. We agree that housing and homelessness are a level of crisis, not just here in Durban, but across the state and across the country. And so it's our position that all levels of government have a responsibility to do what we can to respond to the crisis. So we do a lot of advocating to state and federal governments for public housing, for increased funding, and we do that in partnership with other councils and other groups. I guess the second point is that we are exploring the use of our own assets to provide affordable housing in partnerships with others. The model that has been proposed that's on the agenda tonight is not to sell the land but to lease the land, so that we make sure that we retain ownership of the land. But I guess your proposition to us is around who would be managing that. And we would be obviously very open to the state government entertaining the idea of public housing on that land. However, I'm not sure that they're interested in it, given that they're selling off other parts of their land which they could be developing. So we'll continue to provide affordable housing, community housing in the absence of that leadership by the state government to try and help bridge that shortfall here in Durban. The third thing that we're doing at the moment is developing our new housing strategy, which will look at the multiple roles and options and partnerships that we can play as a council to further enable affordable housing, because there's lots of different, I guess, levers that we could potentially pull, and so we'll be thinking about that as we progress that strategy. In terms of you specifically asked whether we would undertake to implement a call through its peak bodies. It's definitely something that we can consider to take to the MAV State Council, which the next meeting will be in May. So we can make sure that we consider that when they call for motions at the time, because I think it's a good conversation that we need to have as all levels of government, as I said, because we can't all solve, none of us can solve it on our own. We need to work together. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Greco?
Time?
Yes. Can you just, yep.
Extend question time by 15 minutes.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. So there's a motion moved by Councillor Greco, that's seconded by Councillor Rennie. All those in favour? Motion is carried. Okay. The next question is from Serena O'Mealy.
Thank you. I won't start with my question if you don't mind. I just wanted to make a comment about Brian Sanahan. We come to a council meeting to make representation to our councillors and to our mayor, and none of us expect to have to put up with that kind of behaviour. There are children in the audience, there are women in the audience. It's abusive, it's aggressive, and it doesn't actually meet with the standards that are required for the question and submission time. And I know that you've done your very best to disallow it, but I would like to say that this man should be banned from future question times. He is a serial offender. He has no sense of propriety. Enough is enough. It's an OHS risk for all of us.
Thank you for that comment. We'll obviously be reviewing what happened at the council meeting, and we'll take that on board. Thank you.
Thank you. So the following questions are asked on behalf of the Ruthven Park Community Reference Group, and I understand that there's an item on the agenda which I'll be making a submission to as well. So I don't expect an answer right now. First one is, will Durban Council ensure that the reference to Ruthven Park as a site for a children's hub will be formally retracted from Durban's Strategic Plan 2017 to 2021, and that the site will be protected in its entirety and permanently as public open space? The second question is, will Durban Council formally add the Ruthven Park site in its entirety to the Durban Open Space Strategy, which is currently under consultation? Thank you.
As you mentioned, there's a recommendation that's being presented to us tonight, which seeks to change the focus of the master plan that's outlined as our Big Action 6 in our council plan. So I won't preempt the decision this evening, but we can talk about it, I guess, after the decision is made. In relation to the open space strategy, so currently there is a draft strategy being developed and will be out for public consultation, I think, in about a week's time. This strategy provides an overarching framework providing strategic direction for public open space planning in Durban, and it does not provide park-specific recommendations within it, so it provides, I guess, the principles that we apply to the different open spaces. And as I said, we're finalising the draft, so you can have a look at that draft next week and provide comment based on that. Thank you. Okay, that is all of the questions that we received. Are there any further questions? Yep, if you'd like to come down the front. Yep. Just before we go on, I'm just concerned about the walking stick. If we could just move that just so that no one trips over. Thank you. Thank you, Dulcie.
Madam Mayor and councillors, thank you for allowing me to raise a question with the council this evening. My name is Parish Charles, and many of you will know me. I would like to ask the Durban City Council to formally consider terminating the current facilities management agreement that is held by YMCA with respect to NARC, where human rights breaches have been tabled to the council, and where the impact upon people who access the centre through the NDIS is quite, where the problems are escalating, and where many people like myself are being impacted. I know that consideration's been, the matter's been raised through previous council meetings, but the matter is now quite serious.
Okay. So we'll have to take that question on notice, and officers will have a conversation with you directly about that question after the meeting. Yeah, thank you. There's a question here at the front with Dulcie. If we could get the microphone. Oki? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll show, that's what I'm referring to, leaflets thing. Okay. Mayor, councillors and the CEO. Several times during the past few months, I have pointed out to council staff that council's access and mobility, or aren't I doing it? Oh, sorry. Several times during the past few months, I've pointed out to council staff that council's access and mobility leaflets contained incorrect information, yet these leaflets are still being put on display in council premises, libraries. The leaflets say they are designed to help people with a disability or mobility difficulties to get around. But, for example, the Broadway and Edward Street leaflets say the 553 and 558 buses go into the bus station on the east side of the rail line. Those buses do not go there. In fact, the 558 bus does not go to the station. One time, I said it would create difficulty for a person with a disability to find herself in the wrong area. What could they do? I was told by the staff member they would have to get the family to help them. Surely the answer should have been that council should put out correct information. Secondly, a more recent leaflet, older and active in Durban, events information says one gets to Northcote Town Hall on the 68 tram. No, it should be 86 tram, and it would surely be helpful to include the tram stop number. Questions. Is it that Durban Council just does not care, or are you prepared to fix these matters and ensure Durban Council becomes a more professional organisation?
Thank you for that question and for the feedback on those specific leaflets. The CEO would like to provide a response.
Thank you for the question, Ms Hook, the questions. And thank you also for providing myself with the corrections with regard to our transport options for the city. It's great to get feedback from the community to help us to be the best that we can. I absolutely am committed to making sure that the information that's provided to the community is correct and accurate, and I really apologise unreservedly for the inaccuracies in those documents. I will make sure that they are fixed as quickly as possible. Please keep your eyes and ears out for us, though. We always appreciate the help because from time to time we do get it wrong. But thank you again for pointing that out, and I'll have it fixed tomorrow.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Mr. Nugent, if you'd like to come down.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My name is John Nugent. I live in Epping. I'd just like to ask you just a quick question about tonight's agenda. You got down W.H. Robinson Reserve Sport Pavilion. Can you tell me what club occupies that pavilion?
So that pavilion's in West Preston, and the Durban Falcons occupy that pavilion. That item in particular was because a contractor went bankrupt, and we need to appoint a new contractor.
No, that's fine. Anyway, tonight I've got two questions.
Well, that was a question, so...
No, that was just a question to find out.
That was a question.
All right, then. I'll ask my second question then.
All right.
Madam Mayor, last time I checked, Keon Park still comes under the City of Durban. Madam Mayor, I'd like to know, Council had input to the railway crossings at Oak Avenue and Murray Road. The Keon Park railway crossing would have more traffic than those two crossings. Could you please advise what is happening at the Keon Park railway crossing?
As far as I'm aware, the Keon Park level crossing will remain as is. Council did a feasibility study a number of years ago to look at the options of removing different level crossings within the municipality and to advocate on removal of some of them, as you've pointed out, and that was based on, I guess, the feasibility, taking into account the traffic and the area in which those level crossings are placed. Council made a decision to advocate on the specific ones at Oakover, Kramer and Murray at the time. During those deliberations, it was never put to us that Keon Park we should be advocating for its removal.
Well, put it this way, even though...
But it's something that I can now go back and ask, you know, was it considered in the study? I'm not sure. So we can take a look at it now.
If you can, Madam Mayor, I'd greatly appreciate that. Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Okay. If there are no further questions, we'll move now on to petitions. Are there any further petitions? Are there any petitions? No? Item 7 is urgent business. Is there any urgent business? No? Item 8, consideration of reports. 8.1, proposed lease of 52 to 60 Town Hall Avenue, Preston for affordable housing. I have a number of people who would like to make a submission. So I'll call you out individually. So the first one is Demi Cyprus. Sorry. Cyprus?
Good evening, Madam Mayor, councillors. My name's Demi Cyprus. I'm the daughter of Rena, who lives in 50 Town Hall Avenue. I'm really sorry, printer was not playing nice tonight, so I'm going to have to do some of this from my mobile. I just want to I want to touch on a point that was, it was included in the email, and it stated that officers have assessed the issues around the proposed lease, and it is the officers' view that that they are unlikely to occur in practice. For example, there is little evidence to suggest that affordable housing developments impact upon property values or rates of crime. I would like to suggest otherwise when we're talking about property value, unless it's a single story or possibly double story. I think this is directly going to affect 50 Town Hall Avenue. I think this is directly going to affect the value of 50 Town Hall Avenue. Mum will have a lack of privacy. She's going to lose the afternoon sun, and this is a safety issue as well because it will be overtowering, so they will be looking into the property, into 50 Town Hall Avenue. In my opinion, this is greatly going to affect the value of 50 Town Hall Avenue. There's also the issue of access to laneway. We'd like to know what would happen to the access to laneway from the car park and around, rather than having to go right up the street and down. Parking, and every resident is talking about the parking. I'd like to invite anyone that's here to come over to 50 Town Hall Avenue. We'll have a coffee and we'll sit out there for 10-15 minutes and we'll just have a look at what's going on in the street. Parking is an absolute nightmare. We've got the police station, we've got VCAT Intercultural Centre, we've got council, customers, we've got the Preston Library, we've got High Street, and then on Saturdays, and on Fridays, we've got the market parking as well. Again, I would urge anyone to sit there on a Friday or a Saturday and have a look at the people that are parking in the street. The other worry is...
Sorry, we're over time now. That's time.
2 minutes?
Yes. We're up to 2 minutes. We're almost.
Do I need to cut it right now?
Yeah, I'm sorry. There are other people who are waiting to submit. Thank you for your submission again. Thank you. The next submitter is Anne Laver.
It's Anne Laver from Northcote. Regarding Town Hall community housing, as it's called, I was one of the minority of people, I think my submission number was number 14, which made a submission in favour of the proposal subject to the plan being for vulnerable public housing tenants and that there would be a separate car park for residents. That was my criteria. The proposal which was put forward by officers is instead for housing for community housing, not-for-profit organisations which do not offer housing for the most vulnerable of tenants who are duly excluded by these organisations which cherry-pick only the best tenants who are required to pay higher rates than those on public housing. I noted that many of the 61% of people who are against this proposal live close to Town Hall Avenue, and I think there are quite a few migrants. So I hope this is not offensive to anybody. They arrived here in Australia with little and have worked hard to build a life in Australia, and therefore I feel it is disappointing that they are not in favour of helping others less fortunate. The council officers have proposed the solution to the lack of parking is to make it even harder to find parking and reduce the time allowed to park. This makes it difficult to complete shopping and meetings at the council offices. I feel the council officers are making decisions instead of the community. And if so many people are against the proposal, then we should listen to the majority, I reckon. The council have listened to the community, or listened, I think tonight they're going to, in respect to Ruthven Park, but ignoring concerns of the many in this matter and are not really offering any alternative. That's my submission.
Thank you. I'll now call on Robert Douglas.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Councillors. Robert Douglas from Preston. I'm talking about the development at Town Hall Avenue. My comments are going to be entirely about town planning aspect of it. We start off with things that you already know because they've been known for 100 years. The frontage of the little block here, we have historic buildings. Then we have the Shire Hall, then we have the Town Hall, then we have municipal offices, and then we have the welfare, infant welfare, the library. On the other side, we have the multicultural centre and the police station. They're all community buildings, and they've been put there by councils long before you, some of them. Now, to lose that opportunity of having a civic-type open square there, particularly when you consider there's already so much land behind this council where you park cars and other equipment, all of that could be opened up, not immediately, but eventually with planning, to give a civic centre right in Preston. There's parks elsewhere, but there's no parks right in Preston. And we've got the opportunity now to see that area entirely opened up. I think it would be a great shame to lose this opportunity on town planning arrangements. It is most important. And if it is not done, I think previous generations to come will wonder how we came about to have old civic buildings and no civic square around it. That's an aspect that joins with all the other aspects of people objecting to it, but that's the main one I want to bring before you. Thank you.
Thank you for your submission. And the next submission is from Peter Speranza, who I don't believe is attending. No? I do have a copy to read out. Okay. So, Peter Speranza submission. I'd like to submit my voice as part of the community again opposing council proposed development. As a resident of Town Hall Avenue, we reject the development because A, it is inappropriate development for a residential area no matter what zone council deem it to be. B, it is an overdevelopment. C, scale is inappropriate. D, parking is already an issue. E, council should not involve itself in public housing or social issues. And F, public housing will most likely attract unsavoury people in our street. So that was his submission. The next submission is from Giuseppe Cimino, who I don't believe is here either, and so I'll read out his submission. I'd like to resubmit my objection to the proposed public housing building being suggested for the car park at 52 to 60 Town Hall Avenue. My first concern is with the amount of car parking that will be required. This immediate area from High Street to Plenty Road, from Gower Street to Rosebery Avenue is already full to capacity, and that most days I am unable to park outside my own house. My second concern is with the effect this will have on the property prices and rates. I believe that the increase in dwellings in this area will increase the amount of council rates I will have to pay. My third concern is for the amount of elderly people still living in Town Hall Avenue. Being an older, mature person, I believe it will increase fears and safety for these people that I have known for years. I trust you will address my concerns sincerely. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the submissions. So we have the officer's recommendation before us, councillors. Councillor Amir, are you happy to move the recommendation?
Yes, I'm happy to move to the recommendation. Just with a slight change to the numbering. In 3, I believe that retained public parking on site should be labelled A as one of the dot points below.
Yep. Okay. Yep. So that's moved by Councillor Amir, and that was
then changes as follows.
And then all of those, we'll get that fixed up. So that was seconded by Councillor Rennie. Councillor Amir, would you like to speak?
Yes, please. Yep. We've already heard tonight about why public housing, or why housing is really important, and I just want to really re-emphasise that point that for people who don't have a home, and that's not just people who are sleeping on the street, but people who might be couch surfing or relying on staying with friends or family, it's really hard to be involved in other parts of life. It's hard to hold down a job, it's hard to get involved in the community, it's hard on families. So housing really provides the foundation for life and all parts of life. And I guess part of the role of council is caring for the community, and so because housing is so important for the community, that is one of the reasons why it's so important to us. And we've definitely heard loud and clear the concerns that have been raised about parking in the area, and I absolutely agree that we need to have, not just for that street, but a precinct-wide parking plan for Central Preston. That is something that is underway, that's coming, that we're looking forward to, the parking plan for Central Preston, and also the further changes that we're going to be seeing in Central Preston. It is in the current budget, it's in the council plan, all those opportunities that can be realised, and with the exciting announcement around the level crossing removals, getting the level crossing removals including at Kramer Street and Murray Road, that provides new opportunities for opening up new land. And I do really like the idea about having a civic square in Preston. That's something that I think is important, to have those places for people to gather, those more formal spaces, as well as the green space. And that's something that was raised in some of the submissions. It's something that we hear about a lot. There's a lot of concrete around here, and some of the green spaces we do have in Preston are not that easy to access, like the football oval down the road. So we absolutely know those are issues. That said, I am excited about this project. I've been so disappointed to see and hear about the sell-offs of public housing land by the state government, and of course, I do strongly believe that state government should be providing enough housing to everyone, and so in some ways it's a little bit sad that we have to be picking up the pieces with the meagre little bits of land that we have. But that said, I am proud that we can play a small role for helping people for something that they really need, being housing. I do acknowledge for that site that there may be some impacts for people in the adjoining properties, and some of the issues have been raised about overlooking and overshadowing. And I thought it was an unusual comment saying that this is not appropriate for a residential area when we're saying this is going to be residential. This is going to be people who are living there, and some of those concerns are very common concerns for any development, whether public housing, social housing, or private housing. And I absolutely want to make sure that we can do everything we can to reduce those impacts for those residents in the adjoining blocks, to reduce some of those impacts around the overshadowing, the overlooking, so that hopefully this can be a project that everyone in the community can be excited about and proud of, that we're playing this important role for people who aren't lucky enough to be able to afford to buy their own houses in Preston.
Thank you, Councillor Amir. Councillor Rennie.
I'm similarly very pleased to support this initiative tonight, whilst acknowledging that it is a difficult issue for many people in our community, and I thank everyone who came to the hearing of submissions meeting, at which we heard about some of the concerns in the community. But the submission that most stayed with me was actually, I think, probably the last submission of the night, when one of our residents got up and said that she was somewhat concerned to hear that people were actually more concerned about housing their cars than housing people. And car parking has come across as the number one issue of concern. And I understand, because I think we all know how stressful it is when we can't find a park, and that can make us late and it can make us stressed and put everyone in a bad mood. But I also think that there's other ways of managing parking in this precinct. And in fact, parking is already bad. I don't think it's actually this development that's done that, because this development isn't there. I think council has a significant role in actually responding to that. But on the issue of the provision of social and affordable housing, I think this is so important. The single fastest contingent of homeless people in our community are older single women, and they're being priced out of the rental market. And social connection and people's health and well-being is so tied up in having appropriate housing, and I think that this is an amazing site to be able to deliver some of that housing to members of our community. These are not people from out of space. These are people who are already in our community, who are being priced out of the housing market, who desperately want to stay here connected to their friends and family. And we have an opportunity to make that happen. And I think that we can demonstrate through this project that social and affordable housing can be high quality, it can be environmentally sustainable, it can be beautiful, and it can really play a part in the housing mix in our community.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Williams.
Council has been actively looking for opportunities for land that we could use for affordable housing. It's been many years that we've been working on this pilot projects. It's important that there were 3 sites that we were looking at, which was the Town Hall, Robinson Road Reservoir, and the Northcote Plaza Park in Northcote. I personally don't believe that the Town Hall is actually the best possible outcome for affordable social, public or community housing. I would rather like to see it more as an open space, and I'd like to council to actually look at other avenues rather than this particular spot. I'm not against a social housing or affordable housing. I just don't believe that this is the most appropriate site, because I think it's too small, congested, and with the constrictions that we have regarding car parking, we've got the library. It might be something that we need to look at later down the track, that we build on top of the library, and we have social housing, affordable housing on top of the library. But I don't believe that this particular site, I personally think, is the most appropriate at this point in time, and I'd like us to look at other avenues, which is the Robertson Road or the Northcote Plaza car park in Northcote.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Are there further speakers? Councillor Messina.
I was also present at the submissions hearing, and I was also taken back and really listened to the last person, who I forgot her name, and she said, "We put cars over people." And when I look at this submission, I look at a few things. And yes, we can look at other sites, but who's to say that those other sites won't be other projects that we'll be looking for in the future? I've heard parking is an issue, and we do have a problem with our parking municipality, right through the municipality, not just in Preston Central. And there is, it's really interesting to see is that more people have turned up when we look at this particular process and this particular recommendation, rather than what's happening in the whole of the city of Preston. We had only about, I think, 15 people turn up to that, yet we've had, I don't know how many submissions over car parking. So I don't understand the process in terms of that. But I do know one thing, and one thing is that there are 80,000 people waiting to be housed and 20,000 are children, and we're worried about car parking. I think we do have to consider car parking in terms of the whole particular area. But let's not forget one thing. We do own Kelvin Grove. Who's to say that we don't close off Kelvin Grove and have some open parking, some open space there? We also have car parking that we have here. Who's to say that we can't have that open up to the municipality during shopping precinct times? I think we need to also clarify and dissociate between what's affordable housing and what's social housing. Affordable housing is homes that are marked reasonably less than what the market value is so that more people can afford it. It is not a home that is under social housing, public housing or commuting housing. There is a difference and we need to ascertain and acknowledge that difference. So I'm for this submission. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Messina. Any further speakers? Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor. I have an amendment to the motion that's been presented here, the recommendation that's been presented here by the officers. Could I submit my...
Yep,
or I can read it out.
Read it out,
yeah.
and then
okay, the first point is that under point 2, where the word affordable housing, I would change that word affordable to social housing. That's the first point. And the second point that I'd like to change is under point 3, under 3A, is to replace the wording that's in the report there with the following: consider underground parking to increase public car parking on site. So they're the two changes that I'm proposing.
Okay, I'll go to the mover and second to see if they're accepted.
Could we get a comment on whether that proposal is consistent with the agreement we have with the Lord Mayor's Charitable Foundation?
Ms Olivia?
And whether it's feasible on the site?
Just turn your microphone on.
Through you, Mayor Lasserf. So the reference to social housing rather than affordable housing is consistent with the agreement with the Lord Mayor's Charitable Foundation. Considering underground parking, at this stage we don't know to what degree that affects the feasibility of a development on site. We could certainly find that out through the process, but I can't tell you at the moment whether it's feasible or not.
Okay, but it's to consider it, so yeah. Does the mover and seconder accept those amendments?
Yes.
Affordable social housing. Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Well, no, I think it was
to eliminate
remove,
affordable.
Remove affordable. Are we removing affordable? Yep, there we go.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so we're removing the word removing affordable, changing it to social, like that.
And then removing retaining public parking on site with consider underground parking to increase public parking on site.
We're keeping retaining the current parking and considering underground parking to increase.
No, I'm saying that because it's implicit in mine, yeah?
All right, so removing... Okay, so the mover doesn't accept that change.
I just don't see the difference. I mean,
hang on,
my point...
Hang on. You're getting into a debate here. So if we could just...
I'll just ask the mover and seconder to think about it, what's there in point A.
So
could I get further clarification from the officers?
Well, they've said that... Oh, hang on. Did you provide that advice based on removing the first part of A.
Given that the word consider is there, it doesn't, my interpretation of that phrasing would not be to mandate an increase, it would be a consideration of that. What I don't know is if...
It doesn't mandate keeping anything though, consider. Is that true?
No, that's right.
Okay.
Can I ask a question of clarification in relation to the wording?
Yeah.
Just to be clear, and to the proposer being Councillor Greco, is it to actually replace the retaining public car parking on site? So the phrase, I'm just wondering if, because what I heard was retaining...
Hang on, so no, your word's missing now.
Sorry,
we're going to
that's all right, that's fine.
delete all of A and replace it with what's on the screen. It is not accepted by the mover and seconder, so would you like to move it as an amendment?
Could I just ask a question? If we leave retaining public car parking on site with my additional
yes.
statement, how does that change things? I just want to understand how it changes things.
So I think it changes things because retaining public car parking on site means that we have to maintain the car parking on site. But if you were to delete that and just have the second part, it's consider underground car parking to increase public car parking on the site.
Okay.
So there's no mandate to keep any of the car parking.
But that was my intent, so I'm happy to accept the first part of the statement. Retaining public car parking on site and consider underground parking to increase. Sensational.
Okay. Does the mover and seconder now accept that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Great. Thank you.
I'll speak to it. I'm glad that we got that clarification because I thought maybe we're on two different wavelengths. First of all, I won't repeat what the other councillors have said. Why I've offered these two amendments, or to the motion, I'm glad that they've been accepted, is that if we look at the definition of, in terms of affordable housing, I don't think the definition of affordable housing is tight enough. I think the definition of social housing is a little bit stronger in terms of capturing more vulnerable people in terms of providing housing for a much more vulnerable cohort of people. And I think that's important, particularly of the comments that we heard tonight, where public housing is being dismantled across the state. And as a result of that, more and more people are falling right through the cracks and not even being able to get public housing. So by having the definition of social housing, at least this proposal possibly can also capture not only community housing, but also within that definition is the possibility of public housing. And that's where we may need to open up a discussion with the state government about whether there should be also some public housing on that site. So it leaves that door open. In relation to the change in regards to 3A, I think we need to give some assurances back to the community because the issues that have been raised around parking and have been raised around the built form and other issues, planning issues. I don't subscribe to the issues of crime and issues like that. I don't think that they're issues that we should consider and they're not actually planning issues. But I think parking is a real problem and that's why I've proposed that we should seriously consider when we're tendering this proposal out is that underground car parking is properly considered. It's needed in the area. It's a congested area. It will continue to be more congested, and I think that this goes a long way to alleviating some of the main concerns that have been raised by the community.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just put my Working with Children's check card down. Mayor, I'd like to thank all the submitters that have made their submissions, including those that have appeared here tonight. And I'd like to thank those in particular who've appeared here tonight for the respectful way in which they've engaged in this issue. It did strike me in the hearing of submissions process and some of the submissions received that there were some submissions that were far less respectful, particularly in relation to other human beings who desperately need housing and I would say deserve housing in a community like ours. I think Durban City Council prides itself on being an organisation, and I think Durban as a community is a community that prides itself on being inclusive and ideally broadly representative of the economic and social diversity of Melbourne and in fact, a significant part of the world. And we'd like to keep it that way. This project is not going to solve the housing crisis. Marion Harper in her submission made that very clear, and I agree with her. That's not the objective. The objective here is not to solve the housing crisis. It is for council to enter the space in a way that is meaningful, that is effective, and that is realistic in terms of what we can do right now in a short time frame. But I think we should also take up the challenge that Mrs. Harper raised with us, which is how do we continue to advocate with great aplomb and great assertiveness in the national housing debate, and I completely support the proposal that she put forward. But we must also be able to walk the talk and see where those opportunities are. So whilst I appreciate all the local issues that have been raised, we should be seeing a lot more of these sorts of projects throughout Darebin, in my ward in Rucker, in Kazali ward and in Latrobe ward, because that's the only way we're going to keep the pressure on other levels of government to respond to the housing crisis.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. I think we've heard from everybody. Councillor Amir, would you like the right of reply? Yes. Oh, yeah, sorry, no, it's been amended, so there's no right of reply. Okay, so I'll now put that to the vote. All those in favour and against? Motion is carried. If we could have Councillor Williams' vote of opposition recorded, please. The next item is 8.2, Reimagining Ruthven Master Plan Update. We have a number of submitters for that item. So I'll call on Michael Brennan first. We might just pause for a second just to let those people who might want to leave as well. Thank you. Okay.
Okay. Hello. Just as a group, we've got our order that we're going to come out.
Oh, okay. So who am I speaking to now?
Paul Zamarian.
Okay. Thank you.
I was a former student of Ruthven Primary School, and I'd just like to talk about this. A vision garden city. As we should know, this is an opportunity to restore a fundamental idea to this area, the Marylands Estate. This was envisioned as a garden city, as it can be seen on the old maps of the area, that was systematically taken away from us since its inception and continually attacked throughout the years, never having an opportunity to be able to come to its full fruition. But I was lucky and able to see a small glimpse of this vision in my youth. I used to use those open spaces and cherish them as a child. They are gone now. Today, this is still much needed and precious idea that must not be hindered with selfish compromise. This is a relatively small but workable piece of land that has the potential to bring back this idea, back to the people of this area. A complementing open space for all ages, with the idea to be able to feel welcome, but most of all, a place that sets no boundaries, except the boundaries that have been set within its surroundings. A place that goes from the hustle of today's life to a world of welcomeness, a place of belonging, without judgment of why you are here. A place of recreation, a place to relax and reflect. A space to move in every direction without no-go zones, because you don't fit the criteria or the purpose. To be able to explore every piece without prejudice or condition. A place to feel solidarity of fellow companionship. A place to meet, blend, relate and share together. You may ask, how can we achieve this idea? It's quite simple. You start with the most natural aspects, consideration for others, and therefore respect for others, and therefore respect for yourself. Please respect the wishes of the people. Thank you.
Many thanks for your submission. Who is coming up next? Michael Brennan?
I'm very proud of Ruthven and this special area. I call it our botanical gardens. I'm very emotional about this open 3.05 hectares of land, as I had a very close liaison with this site before 1966, when it was given to us as a school, and when it was no longer needed as a school, it would be returned as open parkland. I have now come to a point out to you that it is a basic need in the quality of life for elderly and the younger generation, as we have planned it so, to be the centre where we can go for relaxation, sport, meditation and shade, to walk the dog or just enjoy the open, clean air. Keep it for future generations, for them to enjoy, nurture and maintain. We have treasured this site and we have fought for it when others didn't respect that. Take this away from us and we'll be like the Housing Commission area in Glenroy and Broadmeadows. Let it be said in the future that this council listened, discussed, they acted and gave us open space. They got it right. You got it right this time. Do not make the mistakes of your forebears who ruined our beautiful garden Marylands estate. They allowed open areas to be sold off, built on and lost forever. It was only the mentality at the time that it's only a workman's area. Now we must not let this once again encroach on our valuable area that provides us with pride, satisfaction, that we together are planning for the future again. I beg you, in all sincerity, I know what it means to have it there. I use it. I know its benefits. I'm so pleased you bought it back, and I thank you for allowing this old fellow to share his feelings with you. I'm very pleased also that the speaking system is working as it should. I have new earphones today. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your submission. We'll hear from Serena Emili next.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. After the purchase of the former Ruthven Primary School site, Council deferred the already budgeted master planning process for a year for financial reasons. A further year has been lost because the proposal for a children's hub on the site was added to the Durban strategic plan without first consulting relevant stakeholders or undertaking a demographic analysis of whether there was a need for such a facility. Subsequent analysis has shown that there is no need for such a facility on the eastern side of Edgars Creek, where the site is located, and where there are already 5 early learning centres of various types, some of which are undersubscribed. The story is different in other parts of the Latrobe ward, which lack early learning access. Therefore, the Community Reference Group wholeheartedly supports the following statement in tonight's agenda. Quote, community feedback has shown that a significant proportion of the community do not want a building at the site, and Council's technical investigations have also confirmed that there is not an immediate need for a children's hub in this area, nor is this the only site in this community that could provide for facilities at a future point in time when additional services are expected to be needed. I want to emphasise that it's not just the CRG members who are opposed to buildings on the site, but the broader community who attended the Family Fun Day. It has been offensive to the CRG to hear this parcel of land described by some as free land. It is not free. It has been hard won via a campaign that started prior to 2012. We don't want to see up to 23% of the land fenced off for a large exclusive use facility. Also, there is a known public open space deficit in that area which Ruthven can fill. While tonight's council report largely reflects community aspirations, the proposed motion does nothing to afford permanent protection to the land. The children's hub goal in the strategic plan needs to be set aside, and the highest level of protection afforded to the whole of this site. The CRG needs certainty, so that we can move on and plan a beautiful park that showcases Darebin's environmental and social credentials for the sake of future generations. Thank you.
Thank you for your submission. And we'll hear from Terry Mason next.
Terry Mason, Reservoir. I'd like to offer honour and respect and esteem to those of the Kulin Nations who are the custodians of this land, and in particular to the elders. Concerted effort was expended by the community to keep a portion of the former Lakeside school site bordering Merry Creek and the former Ruthven Primary School site in community use. There was wide consultation conducted as to the importance of these sites and their potential use. The overwhelming response was to emphasise the importance of the natural environment at the Lakeside site. There was little contention that the land there held notable remnant vegetation and would be a significant part of the future of the Merry Creek natural environment, including the habitat required for the endangered blue-banded bee, amongst other. This site may be subject to industrial seepage and air quality issues due to location, but was still considered as of importance. It is also of little consideration to developers. The Ruthven Primary School site was also of significance as a natural corridor between the Durban and Merry Creeks for birds, insects and other wildlife, with Edgar's Creek as a nearby midpoint, and environmentally could be considered pristine compared with the other more industrial site. The community felt there was also a high priority need to cater for the non-sports field social aspects of the community and supply a natural and social need for the younger children and a more passive and reflective area for the older demographic as a shortage exists. It would appear that the threat at the Ruthven site comes from it being lucrative to developers and development. The council nearly missed the opportunity to do the proper thing initially. It was able to acquire the land at significant discount from the state government on the condition it was for community open space, and the council has the moral, social and environmental imperative on it to ensure that this open space usage is its ongoing priority.
Thank you. And David Seeley.
A greener, bolder, more connected city. Darebin's official vision is beautiful in simplicity and inspiring in its reach. A greener, bolder, more connected Reservoir West is the aspiration of our community. 3 years ago, my family bought into the area next to the Marylands kindergarten. Not long after moving in, I came home from walking the dogs, excited by discovering an amazing blank canvas of space with incredible potential. This was the Ruthven Primary site, and I soon learned local residents were working desperately to save it from the hands of developers as open space for all. The people of Reservoir West have always been connected to their environment and to their space with pioneers who left the close density of the inner city in search of just these things. When you walk our streets, you will see many people engage closely with nature in their carefully tended gardens, their proudly productive veggie beds, and their fruitful home orchards. But it's the highest level of dreaming and planning that we need to look to. The original visionary Marylands estate was part of a bold new direction in town planning to move away from grid-based suburbs to garden suburbs. It was a vision of people and buildings and meeting places that were integrated into their environment. It was radical and it was bold. It was green and it was bold. And it was the largest of its type in Melbourne. But this bold vision was never fully realised. The Great Depression and war dissolved the edges, and the short-sighted sale of most community space by council and state governments finished it off. Tonight, we are calling on the council to be the heirs of the Marylands vision, to be better, to be bigger, to be bolder and greener than our councils and governments of the past. This is a chance to complete the vision, so we call on you tonight to preserve and embrace the entirety of the Ruthven site in perpetuity as a precious and rare opportunity for a greener and bolder way of looking at space. We ask you to understand that the open space of Ruthven is the community hub. We ask you to see it as a place where people connect as much or more than they do in any building. And we especially ask you to work with it, to care for it, resource and staff it at least as much as we do any of our community buildings. We've laid out a blueprint in Appendix B that we hope matches the bold, green, connected vision of Darebin. It delivers in many different ways on Darebin's vision, mission and goals, and we're committed to working with you to deliver on your commitments in the council plan. We just need you to commit to us. Thank you for the chance to speak tonight. May your deliberations bring council and residents closer together.
Thank you for that submission. That brings us to the end of the submissions. Councillors? Would someone like to move a motion? Councillor Greco.
I have an alternate motion.
Okay, we'll pop it up on the screen.
Look, I'll give councillors and members of the gallery an opportunity to read the motion.
So this wasn't the one circulated, it's a little bit different, is that right?
Yeah, the first 4 points, or 5 points, are different to
All right,
what's
we'll just give everybody a moment
been proposed in the report.
Okay, we'll just give it...
But... Yeah.
Okay, so Councillor Rennie is happy to second that. Councillor Greco, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, before I'm sure that I'm going to run out of time, so I want to say right at the outset that I'd like to thank members of the Community Reference Group. I'd like to thank them for their passion and for their determination in seeing this project through, and also educating both councillors and our officers about the value of this open space and why it should remain open space into the future. The motion that I am putting forward here is to collect the sentiments of the reference group, who are representatives of the community, and that's why the first 5 points have been changed in order to reinforce the points that have been made by the various speakers about locking up the whole of the site as public open space.
This is the wrong... sorry, I'll just pause you there. This is the wrong motion. The first one was right. And we don't have a clock yet, but we'll say you've got 2 minutes. Okay, and if we could put 2 minutes on the clock now, please. Thanks. Sorry to interrupt you, Councillor Greco.
Let me check it now.
Yeah, okay. It changed before while you were speaking, that's all.
I'd just like to change the word in point number 3, confirm that council's long-term plans do not include any exclusive use buildings on the Ruthven site.
That's what it says, yeah.
Rather than remove the word large.
Oh, large, okay. Pardon? You okay with that, Councillor Rennie?
Just note that large was in all the former versions of the motion.
Councillors, let's just get this right. Yep.
Yeah. We'll just take a moment. We shouldn't be changing the motion midway through the debate, but just to confirm, it was already...
Large was in all versions.
I can't even find my versions. Yep. Okay.
Yep. Okay. I could see the word there. That,
okay. So we'll proceed with as it was circulated with large.
Yep.
And we'll put. Sorry, because I interrupted you as you were already debating. We'll put 2 minutes back on the clock.
Okay.
And we'll start. You can start where you were at. Okay. So we get 2 minutes. Yep. Thanks.
Okay. So that we could keep all councillors on side. I'm happy to that, and I've noticed that in the submission that was provided by the community reference group that the word large is there, so I'm happy with that. So why are we doing this, councillor? So this motion actually spells out the area size so that where there's no ambiguity, about hiving off a bit of the area for any other use. Why do we need this as open space? Well, councillors, even if you look in the report on page 124, if this area was all open space, like we're proposing here tonight, there will still be a deficiency in open space for that particular area. So it's important that the whole area becomes open space. And the other reason is that the population density of the area is expected to increase. Also, part of our own policy, our open space policy, is to have a net gain in open space. So by including the whole site, we will ensure that we get a net gain. Also, what's most important, as has been mentioned by members of the gallery, the site was purchased for the purpose of being open space. So we have to be consistent with that, and the community has been quite passionate about that throughout the years that we've been dealing with this. And also that there's a community expectation, a strong community expectation that the site remains public open space for the enjoyment of the community in that area, where there is a clear deficiency in there. So I'm happy to really move this motion that then we can proceed to the next phase of making something tangible happen on that site so that people can enjoy it as public open space. And in the last 10 seconds that I've got, again, I just really like to thank the persistence of the community reference group. I have not seen a community reference group so persistent and so tenacious in ensuring that the council follows through with its commitment.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Sorry, there's a spelling mistake. Where is it? Oh yeah, if we could just... Yeah. We'll go to Councillor Rennie as a seconder. And if we could just, get the heading right. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm very pleased for a number of reasons to be seconding this motion. But I would like particularly to comment on the eloquence of those community members who addressed us tonight, and just say how delightful it was to hear from you about your love for your community and to know how strongly you've been advocating for this outcome. And I think in that context, it's equally great for us to be able to actually, I think, respond to what we've heard from you with this motion. Sometimes in our council plan, in our strategies, in what we do, we don't get it right, and I think it's become clear from consultation that when we anticipated that this might be a site for a children's hub in our council plan, that actually wasn't what was wanted or needed by our community. And I think as councillors and as a council, we have to be willing to listen, and we have to be willing to actually readjust our thinking in this respect. And we have heard loud and clear from the community that that's not the desired outcome. And that means that we actually are going to have to acknowledge that that is part of the council plan that won't be delivered upon. Rather than going back through a lengthy, time-consuming and expensive process of actually redoing the council plan, which is a statutory process that has certain things that must be met, I think that this makes it very clear that it is not something that will be delivered in the council plan. The council plan runs till 2021, and that we will explain that non-delivery is intentional, and obviously in the next council plan I would expect that won't be there, but that of course is up to the next council. We anticipate that this land, this park, will be available as open space for future generations in Durban. We very clearly heard that that's what the community wants. I think it's a wonderful asset in that area, and that our community doesn't just need built-up areas and formal parks and playgrounds and sports arenas. They actually need wild open spaces, and open spaces that can lend themselves to being used in many different ways.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Messina.
Madam Mayor, I have a question, if I may. Item number 3, confirm that Council's long-term plans do not include any large exclusive use buildings on the Ruthven site. Can we have some clarification what you mean by large exclusive use buildings? Does that mean we cannot put a toilet block on that building, on that site? Does it mean we can't have a canopy with a barbecue area? And are we looking at putting a caveat on the property? Is that what that item number 3 means? And council's long-term plans, does that mean this council's long-term plans? Because we have 2 years left, or we cannot put any.
Okay,
we don't foresee anything.
There.
Yeah.
We'll seek clarification. So it wasn't the officers that wrote that part, though, was it? Pardon? That they can interpret it. Okay. We'll get some clarification on the officers' interpretation.
Through you, Madam Mayor, we would not interpret large exclusive use buildings as precluding a toilet or a barbecue area. Sorry, the last question. Long-term plans. So I would interpret that as a statement of council's intent, and we would enact that through the planning controls at the site. So through the zoning and the other planning controls. Yeah.
Okay, does that clarify?
Did I just see the CEO say no? No, it's just...
They were agreeing with each other, but she was shaking her head. It was a bit weird. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to also thank the submitters and particularly the community reference group members who I know have worked tirelessly to get us to this point, to make very clear the arguments for retaining Ruthven as open space. And I stood in this chamber on the other side, in fact, in 2016 when we made the decision before the last council elections to purchase Ruthven after a very strong and long-running community campaign. And I was really proud that we made that decision. On the same night, we made that decision to also purchase a section of the former Lakeside Secondary College, which of course is part of the Merry Creek frontage. And I'd like to echo the sentiments of some of the submitters tonight and previously to say that the open space that is on our doorstep is the open space we use. So if we do not have open space on our doorstep and within close proximity, then we simply do not have that access to what is a vital part of what we call our green infrastructure here in Durban. When we say green infrastructure, we're not talking about things we're going to build. It's about the things that we actually need to create. And as the open space strategy, the previous one identified, there are significant gaps in the city of Durban, and there continue to be. The good news is that this council has now in development the strongest and boldest vision for open space provision, I think, of any city in Victoria and possibly even the country, because we are talking about, in an inner urban area, a net increase in green open space. You cannot create and increase the green open space in an area like Durban unless you protect and retain areas like Ruthven, and we cannot achieve the biodiversity outcomes and public amenity outcomes unless we see the investment in Ruthven and places like Ruthven. I'd also refer to the work of the Durban Nature Trust, who's very interested in how we can reinstate biodiversity values in some of these sites, including ones that may still have some remnant grassland and other opportunities. So I look forward to all the work that will follow from that.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Are there any further speakers? No? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Motion is carried.
Could that be noted?
Unanimously. Thank you, everybody. My pen. Okay, moving now to 8.3, Aged Care and National Competition Policy. Councillor Messina.
I'd like to declare I have a conflict of interest as I currently am employed in the aged care sector.
Thank you, Councillor Messina.
I'd like to move...
Hang on. Let's let Councillor Messina leave the chamber. It's right. Yep. Councillor Greco.
Yeah, I'd like to move Mayor, I'd like to move an alternate motion to the recommendation that is in the report.
Yes.
And the alternate motion will soon appear on the board. And before I say that, Mayor, I'd like to note that, first of all, I'd like us to consider...
Hang on just a minute. I think this is the...
First, I'd like us to consider item 1 and item 2.
I don't think this is the right part, though. Is it?
If I may, Mayor.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah, that's right. I'd like us to consider item 1 and item 2 first, and then foreshadow a motion that captures some other points that are in relation to the report.
Okay, so the motion, this is the motion being moved by Councillor Greco, seconded by Councillor Williams. Councillor Greco.
Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Williams, for supporting. In relation to those 2 points, Councillors, it's not usual practice for Council to release legal advice that Council receives in regards to some of the matters that Council deals with. But I believe in relation to this particular case, as also the officers have come to the same conclusion, and that in the name of democracy and openness, that we do release the legal advice that we have in regards to this particular matter, particularly in relation to the national competition policy and where Council stand in regards to that policy. It's a fundamental point that we need to address. Then I believe that by releasing the legal advice, the community can also share in the advice that we have obtained, and so like that we're all on the same page in relation to at least looking at what are some of the implications for Council in regards to the national and competitive policy, and also in relation to the issue of competitive neutrality. And I believe that the advice that we have had is advice that presents a picture in regards to how how competitive neutrality can be treated by councils, and what the role of council is in regards to meeting its obligations under competitive neutrality, and the things that we need to do if we wanted to, in order to ensure that the council could in the future continue to provide aged care services, home help services to its community. So that's the basis of it. I think that then also by releasing this legal advice, I think then the second part, the motion that I'm foreshadowing, it'll make the debate in relation to that motion a little bit, can be a bit freer in discussing what that legal advice means and what the implications of that legal advice is in regards to us making an informed decision.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Before I go on, I'm sorry, I forgot we had a submission on this item. Mr Barrett, would you like to make a submission? You're okay? Sorry about that, I forgot. Councillor Greco was so quick to his feet to move that motion. Okay, we'll go to Councillor Williams. No, he
Thank you. I just want to state that the federal government plans to integrate Commonwealth Home Support Program and home care packages where we don't know the ramifications of the transition will be, and who will regulate the services and the follow-up of the community complaints. I'm very proud that this council has one of the highest, if not the highest, of home care in this community. I'm strongly recommending continuing these services until proven otherwise. There's nothing in the report or recommendation that is in front of me and the legal advice that we have received from Maddocks that says anywhere that council is legally obligated to stop the future provisions of home support services by council. In lame terms, what this means is that the legal advice that we have received clearly states that the federal government plans to integrate...
Councillor Williams, until we resolve to release the legal advice, we can't talk about what the legal advice says. So I just want to pull you up on that. The second motion that Councillor Greco wants to move will allow us to talk about the legal advice, but we need to pass this one first.
I was just going by what was in the report, not the confidential matters.
Okay, all right. I thought you were going to go into the legal advice specifically.
No. So it's just, as I said, this is only going by the report that anybody can get online at this point in time. And I just wanted to say that the government has planned to have to Commonwealth support, where was I at? That we clearly states that the federal government plans to integrate Commonwealth home support. It's not a policy, it is a policy and not a law. So I really urge that we do write to we'll get on to that, but I clearly agree with what Councillor Greco wants to do, and obviously bring that legal advice to public.
Thank you, Councillor Williams, and sorry for the interruption. Councillor Rennie.
Thank you.
it's really pleasing when we get legal advice that we're able to share. And so when I read this report and saw that the recommendation before us was that this legal advice become public, I think we all breathe a sigh of relief, because that is almost always our preference, to have things in the public domain. And in this particular instance, I think it is doubly important because we currently are in the process of undertaking a large inquiry into our services and future service provision and how we best meet the needs of older people in our community. And I think actually making this legal advice available to the public is a critical component of ensuring that people in the public can actually make informed decisions and participate in a very informed way. And so I think it's really timely now for us to be able to get this legal advice out there, make sure people understand it, make sure that people have access to it. And, I also think that means sharing it with others, sharing it with other councils, because I think therein begins a conversation that we need to be having about what aged care services look like into the future. And I think understanding legal advice, putting it out there, sharing with others, hearing whether they have also gone down this path of getting legal advice and whether their legal advice is similar to ours is a very important thing. So, how terrific. I have no doubt that we'll actually vote in favour of this recommendation, and then we'll be able to talk about the advice itself.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further speakers? No? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried.
Have been noted.
Unanimously. Councillor Greco.
I move a second motion in relation to this issue. And the motion reads as follows. I'll give councillors and also members of the gallery an opportunity to read the motion.
Happy to second it.
No, so there is this is a second motion. The reason why the motion was split is so that we now can, the first motion resolved to release the legal advice publicly, and now we can talk about what the legal advice says, so that this makes more sense. Yep. Okay, we might just... There's a couple of typos that need to be fixed up, if that's okay. Rights to other councils, so we need a plural there. Inviting them. Yep. Was there anything else? Yes. And right to all mayors, no apostrophe. Thank you. And then immediately, in item 1.
We'll clean it.
Okay, all right, that's just getting pedantic. Okay, so that's moved by Councillor Greco and seconded by Councillor Williams. Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Williams. Now that this legal advice is public, and I think that that's very important, I'd just like to make a few points in relation to what this motion means, councillors. Councillors, if we look at the legal advice, and I know that the members of the gallery have not seen this, but I'd like to point out a few salient points in the legal advice. The legal advice says that there is no legislative or regulatory instrument that requires council to comply with the competitive neutrality principles. That's the first point. The other point that is also made is that the competitive neutrality principles, that if the council were to breach the competitive neutrality principles, all that would be simply a breach of policy on the part of council. So let's get that clear, councillors, because I know there's been some confusion in this chamber that we'll break in the law or we'll break in regulations. We are not breaking the law if we do not comply with the competitive neutrality principles, which must be said that the competitive neutrality principles are basically principles that try to enshrine privatisation in public entities. So we need to be clear about that, councillors. The other thing that is also pointed out is that is that all that will impact, that if we were not to follow the competitive neutrality principles, the only consequence to us would be is that our relationship with the state government may go a little bit sour. Personally, I don't mind if our relationship with the state government were to go sour. It's been sour in many other occasions, because I would like our relationship, at least with our community, to be wholesome, rather than trying to maintain a wholesome relationship with the state government and trying to follow the competitive neutrality principles. So councillors, the competitive neutrality is not a federal government imposition, a legislative imposition or a regulatory position. It is a policy agreement with the state government. So we need to put that to one side. As a result of that, what the motion clearly says is that we immediately write, therefore, to the Premier in this, and also to the opposition leader and also the other crossbenchers, asking them, on top of what I've just said, is to remove that the competitive neutrality requirements that are in the policy. And also that we write to other mayors to come on side with us in launching a campaign against the state government in regards to removing those unnecessary competitive neutrality provisions in the policy. And that we communicate that, and that we also create a task force with other councils in regards to this matter, and that we immediately communicate that to the local media and the state media, and that finally that we also consider conducting a public interest test process at the appropriate time to ensure that we are, in order for us to seek an exemption if we need to, in complying with the national competitive policy regarding councils' home help care services. Again, I'd like to stress, councillors, and I'll finish on this note, even though we're requesting these things, but even if we were not to follow the competitive neutrality policy, the consequences to the council are negligible.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Councillor Williams.
It's important that the Mayor write to the Premier, the Opposition Leader and relevant Minister and Shadow Minister seeking a commitment to modify this policy. It's important that Durban also continue to deliver an excellent home care assistance where many residents benefit from having continuous care, especially the quality of the service, the skills of the staff to the aged residents, where the staff are well trained, very honest and reliable, that do an excellent job. It's important that we continue being an age-friendly city and continue working how best to stay in the aged care, so this council can continue looking after our most vulnerable in our community.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Are there any further speakers? No? Councillor Rennie?
I'd like to propose an amendment.
Yes.
And the amendment would be to number 5.
Yes.
And it would be, if indicated by the findings of the current inquiry into the delivery of aged care services, Council commit to undertaking a public interest test process.
Does mover and seconder accept that amendment?
I'm happy to accept that amendment.
Can you read that out again, please, Councillor Rennie?
And could we get the wording up on the board so we can specifically see what the words are?
If indicated by the findings of the current inquiry into the delivery of aged care services,
yep, so Council
commits to, yep.
Yep. Councillor Williams. Oh, we'll just wait for it to be typed up.
This is the inquiry that...
Review, so the review, yes. Yep. Okay, so we're just changing the wording to, if indicated by the findings of the current age-friendly Durban review?
Yes.
Which is what it's called?
Great.
Just to make that clearer. So that's accepted by the mover and seconder, so we'll incorporate that into the motion. Are there any further speakers to the motion? Councillor
Yes.
Rennie?
And I thank Councillors Greco and Councillor Williams for including that. I've suggested that amendment because I think it's important to acknowledge that we have a very comprehensive process being undertaken, and I wouldn't like to preempt the outcomes of that process, because if it is to be a genuine process, then we must be informed by the outcomes that flow from it. We are all very concerned about what is happening in the aged care space, and I think we are most concerned because we want to ensure that older people in our community experience the best quality services and have access to all of the care and the support that they need to live their lives well. The review that we're undertaking is very important because it's going to look at that at a whole of community level, I suppose, knowing that older people are well when they are connected to their homes, to their communities, and when they receive the personal care but also the social connection. The current moves by the federal government may well undermine this, and we are concerned to ensure that our community gets the best access to services, and advocacy is a big part of that. Our council has been a strong advocate. We have taken similar motions to the MAV where they've been taken up by other councils. I think this is a continuation of that, and I think that if we're to write to appropriate members of government but also appropriate other councils, in fact all councils, invite them to actually join us, share the legal advice that we have with them, and make sure that they are aware that there may be a different pathway forward, then that is a positive thing.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Just 1 second. Sorry about the delay there. There's just something that's been brought to my attention around point 5, and it is something, it was a motion that was circulated this afternoon. So I guess I'd like to seek clarification from the officers around whether we've prejudiced the public interest test by the wording of the last point, because it's a test and we want to get a particular outcome in that test. Have we prejudiced that test? And would we be exposing ourselves to any action?
Through you, Mayor Le Cerf, the wording of number 5 at the moment, that phrase, with a view of seeking an exemption from complying with a national competition policy, in effect is predetermining what the public interest test would be. Now, given that what council does in this space could be subject to commercial or legal disputation, to be seen to be prejudging part of the process would be unwise. And you may wish to delete the wording of section 5 after the phrase appropriate time and just put a full stop at appropriate time.
Okay. Thank you for that advice. Are there any further speakers to this motion?
I will, sorry, if I may, just having heard the officer's caution in relation to the wording of number 5, would propose I think it would be back to the mover and seconder again, to follow the officer suggestion and delete, I think it would be after the word time in point 5, so that it would read, point 5 would read, if indicated by the findings of the current age-friendly Durban review, Council commits to conducting a public interest test process at the appropriate time. I'm happy to expand on that.
Okay, we're not going to debate. We'll go to the mover and seconder to see if they accept that.
I'm happy to accept that.
That's accepted by the mover?
What would be the appropriate time?
Well, I mean, that's not what's being questioned at the moment. It's being whether we have the words, those words there or not. Okay, so that's accepted by the mover and seconder, and so we'll delete that part of that point. Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Are there any further speakers to this motion? Councillor McCarthy?
I will speak to this motion, Mayor, and I'd like to thank Councillor Greco for the effort he's gone to in providing the additional proposed points that we have on screen here this evening. I think that he's done exactly what we should do when we have the opportunity, which is to execute quite deliberate and high-level advocacy in the way that he's proposed there, but also to build coalitions around policy issues such as this. As far as I know, and I'd be, if I can be corrected, then that's fine as well, we're the first council to receive legal advice of this nature and to make it public. And that is a significant thing because it does hopefully shift the debate to the merits that we wish to have this debate discussed, which is how do we ensure that we can provide high quality, accessible, affordable aged care services to our residents and to see the same thing happen in communities across the country in the face of significant federal and state policy upheaval. So one of those blocks appears to be close to being cleared, hopefully, and that is what the legal advice appears to suggest. And I would thank Councillor Greco for his points as outlined. I would also thank Councillor Greco and Councillor Williams for accepting those modified words, because the last thing we want to do is jeopardise our work in this space. And I thank the officers too for picking up on that point. We know which way we want to move. We will know which way we want to move, I should say, once we have undergone that process that has been outlined in many times in this chamber, which is about actually putting our community in the driver's seat through the guidance of two very capable older people to look at what is the way forward in the face of all this. But one of those questions that we've been grappling with about the status of competition policy hopefully seems to be answered, and that means hopefully we can have the focus more on the what and the who, not just the why not. So I look forward to how this might be incorporated and the coalition that we can build with other councils, hopefully.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Are there any further speakers? No, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That motion is carried unanimously. We'll get Councillor Messina back into the chamber before we move on. Apologies, we're just waiting for Councillor Messina. She won't be long. Okay. Hang on, just The next item is 8.4, outcomes of the food waste trial. We have a submitter that wants to make a submission to Council. Anne Labour, would you like to? Oh, it's just a question. Okay, because I had your name down here as a submission. Okay. All right. Great. Okay. Councillor Williams wants to move this motion. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Messina. Councillor Williams.
Just from the recommendation that Council has been actually working towards how we can work out on reducing our waste. And we've conducted a trial down at Kingsbury, and we've had an exceptional outcome of residents actually doing what their expectations of rejigging and putting extra items in our green waste bin. With the wonderful feedback, we believe that the residents would like to continue doing that, and we will eventually do that as a citywide service that we will consider in early 2019, where we will actually rejig how we recycle waste material. What this will do, this will be a huge impact on landfill, and most importantly, it will do a lot more for this council, but overall it will start educating people on how we actually dispose of our waste. So in reference to our green waste, what we will be doing, we'll be actually putting more items rather than just our clippings and grass clippings and trees. We'll actually be putting food waste and other items in the green waste. So I'd like to say thank you to our officers that have put many, many hours and having this report come back to council. I really thank the officers and their team for this project, because I think it's a wonderful outcome, and the benefits will actually, the rewards will come not only today but for the many years in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Messina.
Through you, Madam Mayor, thank you, Councillor Williams. Firstly, thank you to the 1,000 residents who reside in Kingsbury that undertook the trial. Secondly, to the officers, thank you for your passionate dedication and determination to see this through. I am delighted to share with you that I actually will be presenting these findings to the Metropolitan Waste Recovery Forum next week. Food, glorious food, we all like to eat, that's not a secret. When I was a little girl, food waste was unheard of. Our food and waste consumption was based on what the family grew in the garden and what the neighbours and family shared, and food composting was a daily ritual. Even our cat ate zucchini and tomato pasta from the garden. We lived in an earth-to-table, earth circular economy, but what has changed? Consumerism has changed our behaviour. We now live in a society where we throw away. 38% of food is found in our garbage today. We over-cater, we buy more than what we need, and we purchase on the run. When I look at waste trial, or any waste trial, in fact, I look through a lens of an environmental lens and an economical lens. What's the return on investment on council? What's the return on investment on residents? And did we actually implement a behavioural change? Were we successful? And did we divert from landfill? What was the message that was delivered? And I'm pleased to say that the visuals that were used to deliver the message were successful, where 80% of the respondents found that the communication strategy helpful. So what did we do? We undertook a 6-month trial from December 2017 to June 2018, where all food waste was accepted, plastic liners were not accepted, kitchen caddies were provided as incentives, and we had lots of valuations. We had the food bin inspection Nazis that were undertaking audits. What did we find out? We found out that 1/3 of households participated, 6.7% of household food waste diverted from landfill, and contamination, 8% was related to garden waste. There was no food that was actually placed in plastic bags at all. So what did we learn? Can I just finish my statement?
Yeah.
Okay. 72% of people completed the end of trial survey supported the food waste recycling for the wider Durban community. So I say thank you to the officers and all who participated. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Messina. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Amir.
I was excited to see the results of the food waste trial. It's one I've been hanging out for a while. It's been lots of emails and calls and texts from residents interested in this issue, especially after the War on Waste program. So it was interesting to see the results here, and we saw not everyone participated, but we know looking at other areas that when you have something that's across the whole municipality, you can get more people involved. It's something that can be part of cultural change. We know that food waste comprises of, 38% of all waste is food waste, so it's a big chunk of what's going into landfill, and most of it doesn't have to. We know that some people are already composting and using worm farms, which is great, and that was one of the reasons why some people chose not to participate this time. But the great thing about the trial that we ran here in Durban was that residents could put in any type of food into their green bin. So unlike worm farms and compost, which I myself have at home, many others do as well, we know you can't put in meat scraps, you can't put in bones. So, you know, if you've got half a Hawaiian pizza that you forgot you left in the fridge last week, unfortunately that's going to landfill. Unless we're able to, hopefully in the future, roll out this food waste trial across the municipality, which I think is hopefully where we're going. We've been looking at waste holistically. It's come up a few times in this council meeting and others as part of the waste strategy. And when it comes to organic waste like food waste, we're looking at both, or the officers have been doing very hard work looking at how we can maximise the recapture and reuse of carbon, as well as the community education and culture change that Councillor Messina was talking about, looking at how can we reduce the amount of waste that's going into the rubbish bin at all. So I'm looking forward to seeing this happening across Durban, and thanks again to the officers and also the residents who participated in the trial. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Amir. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Rennie?
Yes. My chickens are the food waste strategy for a large part of my street, and that's fantastic, but not everybody has chickens. And as much as it's a foreign concept to me to put food in the rubbish bin because of compost and chickens, not everybody lives in a situation where they can compost or where they can own chickens. And I think in that context it's really important that we actually make a better choice, an easy choice for people. And it is a better choice if food waste can go in with the green rubbish. I was a little surprised that the uptake wasn't higher, but I understand that it's quite difficult to implement a strategy on a sub-regional area because it's harder to get the marketing sort of materials and other things across to people on a wider level. And so I'm really looking forward to the day when we can actually do this at a municipal level, because I think our effectiveness will be much enhanced. And what we do know from this trial is that our communications materials were really good and they're clear, and the low levels of contamination that we saw from food waste was testament to that. So I think we've learned a lot from this trial. It's going to be incredibly useful. I thank the officers and the residents of Kingsbury who participated, everyone who made this happen, and I think it will be very exciting when we can have Durban-wide materials that let people know that from now on food waste doesn't need to go in your rubbish bin. It's a healthier and more environmentally friendly thing to actually put it with green waste and to save it from landfill.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Councillor Greco.
I have a small amendment, which is an additional dot point that I'd like to propose.
We'll just pop it up on screen.
Hopefully it will come up.
Yep. Okay. There it is on screen. Did you want to read it out, Councillor Greco?
Yep.
Did you read out?
Read it out, yeah.
Yep.
That council develops and implements a comprehensive strategy to ensure Durban's culturally diverse community are engaged in the rollout of the food waste recycling program.
Thank you.
Recycling program.
Thank you. Councillor Williams? Councillor Messina, do you accept that?
I'm happy to accept that because it's also in the recommendation.
Okay, thank you. We'll incorporate that into the substantive motion.
Yep.
And would you like to speak to the motion?
Yep. Thank you, councillors. I'm speaking in relation to the motion now. And I thank councillors for including this additional point. I won't repeat the things that have been mentioned already by other councillors. I think this is quite an innovative approach that council is trying to roll out across the whole city based on our trial. But also it must be pointed out that the trial did not was deficient in a certain sense, and that it did not adequately include people from a non-English speaking background in relation to how this program could be rolled out right across the community. And I think that there was a bit of a missed opportunity there in terms of the learnings that we could have got from people from a non-English speaking background. We know that over 30% of people, or even more, were born overseas, and over 40% of people speak a language other than English at home. As Councillor Rennie has said, I mean, she uses her chickens to provide for waste recycle of foods. Many people from ethnic backgrounds have been doing that for many decades, and we have to acknowledge that. And I'm sure that many of them also have other strategies that they put in place in regards to ensuring that food waste don't end up in plastic bags and in rubbish bins. But what's important is that if we are to really change have behavioural change across the municipality, we need to pay a bit more attention to ensuring that we communicate this strategy to people whose first language is not English, and that's why I've put that additional point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. No, we haven't heard from everybody. Are there any further speakers? No? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Motion's carried unanimously. Next item is 8.5, adoption of safe travel strategy and walking strategy. Councillor McCarthy, moved by Councillor McCarthy, seconded by Councillor Amir. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to firstly acknowledge the presence of officers who do all the detailed work and community engagement in relation to this item and have done for a long time. So thank you to our officers who have joined us here this evening. Both the strategies that we are looking to adopt this evening take us and guide our work through to 2028. These are 10-year strategies. They are consistent with the objectives in the council plan, where we outline a desire to increase the share of local trips and local transport in the pedestrian space. We don't do that simply by asking people to do that. We need to make some serious and significant changes in various places throughout our city. And the two strategies provide that guidance in relation to the sorts of changes we need to see. There has been a process of public consultation, 2 rounds in fact, that the report outlines in terms of where some key feedback was provided. One of the pieces of feedback was to include references to older people as vulnerable pedestrians. We know that there are particular groups in our community who are at greater risk of being hit or injured by particularly motor vehicles, but also other interfaces as well. And we want to make sure that people are not only safe to walk, are encouraged to walk, but we're doing everything we can in terms of both the behaviour change and also the infrastructure to get that sort of an outcome. Durban Council actually has a very strong track record when it comes to action to provide safer walking and safer traffic and transport. We were recognised only a couple of years ago by the Transport Accident Commission for some of our innovative work, and of course the work that we're doing, particularly with schools around the octopus routes, has been key to driving that change at younger ages as well. I'll just draw to Council's attention though the sorts of changes that we will see with the adoption of these strategies. One of those key things is actually to make walking as comfortable as possible an experience. It is the #1 form of recreation in the city of Durban. It is also, hopefully, will continue to grow as a share of commuter movement. So people walking for transport to work, walking for transport to other locations such as study and recreation. Walking is not just a recreation activity. For some people it is their primary means of transport, and we need to support that if we're going to see the reduction in both vehicle use and emissions in our city. But some of the changes that are proposed, and they're outlined in particularly the walking strategy, are some serious changes to the way that we think about our streetscapes. And one that I particularly love is ensuring that we have a large tree planted every 10 metres to provide that canopy shade. That is consistent with our urban heat island work, but it is also consistent with the notion of creating spaces that are comfortable for people from a range of abilities to make their way around this city. So I applaud the work of the officers, all the groups that have been involved, and the community for their input into this, both of these strategies.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Mee.
I'd also like to thank the officers who've been working very hard on this for many months, and also the many community members who provided their feedback. So this strategy is really about people being able to get where they need to go, including walking or cycling in a way that's safe and comfortable. And the plan has been designed using quite sophisticated data methods to prioritise those routes to get to where people are likely to be walking to, like schools, libraries, shops, and places in their local community. And we know this is important for lots of reasons. It's important for the environment in terms of the climate emergency that we're facing and reducing reliance on cars. We know it's good for people's physical and mental health to be able to walk or cycle to where they want to go. And I feel that particularly acutely as someone who a year ago was unable to walk or cycle, and now that I can again, it's made a really big difference. We know it's important for reducing traffic congestion, and often when I hear people complaining about all the cars on the road, I think, well, part of the way around that is by making sure that people who want to or would rather be out on foot or out on a bike are able to do that. And often there are people in those groups talking to residents. A story I hear quite often is people saying, things like, I used to ride my bike to work, but then I had a near miss and I've just been too nervous after that. Or saying things like, I wish my kids could walk to school, but there's that one crossing that's just too dangerous with everything happening. So if we can get rid of those barriers, then it can lead to the behaviour change that we're looking for. The plan is to make these changes within the next 10 years. And of course, in 10 years' time, we're going to have more people in Durban. We're going to have new challenges. But I hope that as we do see this cultural change with the younger generation really committed to those better environmental decision-making, that we will see more people walking and cycling. We can already see a reduction in car ownership, and it will only become more important. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Mee. Councillor Rennie.
To understand how important these strategies are, I think it's worth looking at the impact that we've already had with similar strategies in the past. So if we compare the data in the period 2006 to 2010 with the data from the period 2011 to 2015, we saw a decrease in fatal crashes in Durban by 27% and a decrease in serious injury crashes in Durban by 31%. We also saw a decrease in deaths of vulnerable road users in Durban by 55%. So those are good outcomes. But of course, there is no death that's an acceptable outcome. And that's why we are going to continue to do more in this area. But I think what that data shows is that when we act with intent and with evidence and put in place measures to make our streets safer for vulnerable road users and safer for people walking and cycling, we can actually get really good outcomes. And we do that by putting in place the infrastructure that makes walking and cycling an easier and a safer choice for people. So I think these strategies are so important because they're actually going to make our communities safer and healthier for everyone. The data from the past demonstrates that, and I think our commitment to continued investment in this space is going to pay dividends for our whole community.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Messina?
Thank you. Just want to echo the sentiments from Councillor McCarthy, Councillor Mee and Councillor Rennie. Tonight we heard from a number of community groups through submissions. The first one was about parking. The second one was about greener, bolder and more connected city. And I often, from some of the feedback I obtained from the Future of Preston Summit was about connectiveness in our community. And this strategy basically covers all those three particular areas. We want to feel safer in our community. We want to have more connection through our community. So I just wanted to thank the officers for putting this together because it covers not only tonight in terms of the submissions, but also covers the questions and the feedback and that I obtained from the Future Preston Summit. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Williams?
Walking is the #1 exercise that is highly recommended from any GP or specialist. It obviously has its huge benefits regarding whether you have a mental or anxiety issues or even physical. It's an exercise that can be easily done, and on your way, your journey, I think it's important that it continues to keep your awareness and alertness. Now, the safety strategy is very important too, because people in the past have felt unsafe, and having this strategy actually pinpoints the places where people are walking to and from. And what they will do, it will allow people to feel safer when they go to their destinations, especially when they're walking to and from school. Over the years, we've had experience that kids used to walk to school more often than they do today. And we're trying to actually change that and shift that so we actually allow our kids to continue walking to school, but also making them feel safe. It's usually a perception. It's not saying that there is issues here in Durban. It's a perception that people feel unsafe. And we're trying to shift that to allow people to understand that if we get more people walking out and about, you will actually feel more safer when you see the perception of more people on the street doing the same thing, going from A to B. So I highly recommend these two strategies. They work hand in hand. As my previous councillors have said, these strategies are hugely important for developing Durban as a whole and continuing to be a better place to live.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Any further speakers? No? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That motion is carried unanimously. Next item is 8.6, former Preston Girls Secondary College.
Happy to move.
Moved by Councillor Williams, seconded by Councillor Greco. Councillor Williams.
This is pretty straightforward. Many moons ago, when council actually wanted to have a school at this particular site, we had formally asked for the construction of an arts in Preston back in the 1920s. In 1924, council owned particular sections of this title of land. Now that over the years, when the school did open, and then back in 2013, sadly it declined in numbers and eventually closed. There was, over the years, we looked at the population growth, and obviously it was a no-brainer that due to the expansion of schools over-exploding in the area and the population growth in Durban, that the Victorian School Building Authority decided that, and the government thought it was only best that we need to reopen what will now be a new co-ed secondary school for this site. So what this report actually does, it allows that the transfer of land that council had previously was under the assumption that we had under our name, that we actually hand those titles over to the Victorian Schooling Building Authority, and we ensure that the grounds will reopen to a co-ed school, which will start as from next year. So that's a big blessing, and thank you. But we also would like to ensure that the school grounds are able to be accessible by the community for recreational use outside of the school hours, which will only benefit everybody around the area, whether it be community garden or the sporting areas that the school actually offers at this point in time. And that was all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor. I thank Councillor Williams. I think she's covered the report quite extensively. The only comment that I would make in relation to this is that I think it really needs to be underlined the act of goodwill on the part of the council. What we're doing here is that we're giving over land which is under council title over to the education department for the greater good and and in the public interest. There's been a lot of to and froing between the council and the Department of Education in relation to this particular issue, and even earlier tonight we heard about the Ruthven parkland there, and how the council had to pay $6.8 million to secure that. And instead, in this particular case, when council was also asking for some sort of, not even compensation, but some sort of guarantee that how the land will be used into the future, the government was actually really playing it tough. But in the end, I think we're making a good decision, and in terms of ensuring that the school can go ahead. There's been a lot of enrolments in the school. It's been closed down for nearly 6 years now, and from what I understand is that the school enrolments are quite robust for 2019 when it's expected to be open, and also looking into the future, the demographics are obviously changing for the school to have a healthy student population. So again, I'd just like to make that point, is that as a council, this is an act of goodwill that must be noted, and we should ensure that we bring this up in any other negotiations or discussions that we have with the state government.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Are there any further speakers? No? I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Motion is carried unanimously. Next item is 8.7, council meeting dates for 2018 and 19. Moved by Councillor Rennie, seconded by Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Rennie.
This item is fairly straightforward, but that doesn't perhaps reflect the amount of work that I think has gone into actually determining what are appropriate dates for council meetings throughout 2019. And I say that because I know the attention to detail that's gone into trying to make sure that there aren't clashes with the wrong things, that they don't fall on public holidays, and that we don't have to be constantly revisiting this throughout 2019. Essentially, these are the dates that we will be holding a number of our meetings on next year. So these cover the ordinary council meetings, they cover planning meetings, the special council meeting, but also this motion actually speaks to what happens with the committees that we have at the moment, given that ordinarily they go for a year, and it's actually a little bit longer until we're actually going to have a council meeting where we'll be able to deal with which councillors sit on those committees. So our program is going to be meetings every 3 weeks. I'm very pleased to see the introduction of 2 new daytime meetings as per a motion that we passed a few months ago, where we identified that it would be good to involve younger people in Durban in the democracy and the processes of our city, and planning meetings on a monthly basis. So I thank all of those people, I'm sure from across a range of different council areas, whose time and thought has gone into making this schedule work for everyone, and look forward to attending all of these meetings with all of you next year.
Thank you. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to congratulate Councillor Rennie on actually bringing forward the initiative to hold meetings that would be accessible to schools. That was a proposal brought forward some months ago, and it's terrific to see it incorporated into this report for the first time. It is going to happen, and I think it's going to be welcome. It could also be incredibly dangerous for us as a council in terms of the sorts of questions we may be facing, because it is ultimately the future that we are often planning for. And whilst our school students, most of whom can't actually vote at the moment, they are key stakeholders in pretty much everything we do, from the early years services all the way through to aged care. We also have obviously got an item in here which is to extend the appointment of current members of certain council committees, and that is a good move in terms of, while we're undertaking reviews of those sorts of processes, we need to make sure that we continue to have those structures in place and representation from our community, a wide cross-section, in fact, on a range of committees and forums. I also just want to note that whilst there are lots of dates in here, if you take them all together, you can see that councillors and council management, and often many officers as well, are here pretty much every Monday night. We're either in council meetings, planning committee meetings, briefings, or from time to time other community forums as is required. I say that I make that point because it is very easy to just assume that the council meetings are the only times we're here. as most councillors would know, the schedule is that most of us are here several times a week in the evening, and in some cases back-to-back weeknights and weekday meetings as well. So this is a snapshot of some of the activity of the organisation, but there is a huge amount that goes on behind the scenes, and thanks to the officers for all their scheduling work.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I have some reservations in relation to what's been proposed here, because one is that I think it's a bit premature for us to note how many meetings we are going to have next year, given that we do have a review in relation to the council. In terms of the council local laws, which also stipulates the frequency of those meetings. I think that from my count here, there's only about 12 meetings, 12 or 13 meetings in a whole year, and I think that really diminishes the number of meetings that we have as a council. Why I think that that's important is that we've seen in most recent time that where we've experimented with meetings on every third week, that our meetings finish very late. They finish at 9, 10 o'clock, sometimes even 11 o'clock. There's a lot to get through, and I would have thought that if we had more meetings, that would ensure that we're able to get through that work, not in a rushed manner. Also, what I think is very important, councillors, is that I know that we're here more often in terms of the other things that we do, briefings and the other commitments that we have, but the community is not here. And I think that council meetings offer a window and an opportunity for the community to participate and have an input, a direct input into the formal council decision-making processes. I know that there are other avenues and venues where the community can participate, but we've set up a process where the community can actually have, make statements, submissions, ask questions, and by diminishing the number of meetings that we have, I don't think that would aid in ensuring that the council remains open, transparent and accessible to community members.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Just to clarify something that you said there was only 12 to 13 meetings. There's 15 meetings being proposed in this schedule. So I just wanted to clarify that. Are there any further comments? Councillor Williams.
Thank you for the report, and yes, I do very much welcome the daytime meetings, because I think that is great, especially for school kids that like to know how this process works, and they are our future generation, and I think it's important that they get taught it in class, but yet they don't really understand the process. And I think some students are more visual than others, and I think it would be great exercise for them to come out and have an excursion to possibly come out and be part of our gallery. On another note, I have had quite a few concerns from residents that are telling me that they are quite concerned about, with the growing population that we do have in Durban, and especially that it's increasing, that we are now going to actually decrease our numbers of meetings, and their concern is that how is this now going to be a democratic process, and how are they going to be more involved when they're actually going to be less involved when there are less meetings. The other question that they also had asked me that, well, if council's only going to be doing half the amount of meeting times, does that mean council and mayor are going to only get paid half the amount of money? I said, well, I think that's a question that you'll need to take it up further with at a council meeting, possibly come to the gallery and ask such a question. I think it's a tricky one, because I do believe that I think that we are getting more questions, we are getting more people in the gallery, and I think that it'd be nice to show that we are available and we're here. I know we have ward meetings, which are only really taken off from last term, and this term been on council. But I'm not sure if that has been as successful, especially in some wards have been more successful than others. My concern is that I think it's a dramatic cutback. I'm not saying that I'm fully for so many cutbacks. I agree that maybe there are quite a number of meetings that we do have that maybe are uncalled for, but I don't agree that possibly as many that we're considering tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Messina.
First of all, when I first became a councillor, there was one thing that I didn't like, and that was that we didn't have very many briefings and we didn't have the time to discuss the content of the material that was put forward. So I advocated for more briefings so that I became fully aware and was able to make a decision, because I don't like making decisions without data. So I asked for I facilitated or I advocated for some more briefing time. The second point I'd like to point out is that there is content and there is time. So if we're going to be provided with content in terms of being at a meeting, what is the difference between having one more extra meeting? We're still going to have the same amount of content. And how does that equate to us not being transparent? I'm so lost in that particular loop. Does that mean if we have 15 meetings instead of 16 meetings, we are not transparent? I don't understand that equation. The other thing I don't know is, if we still have this amount of content, if we were to have it in 15 metres or 16 metres, don't we not have the same amount of content? The mathematical equation doesn't add up to me. The other thing also I want to welcome is that the fact is that we are having daytime meetings. The children are our future, and we also need to collaborate more with our community, and having the facility or the space where we facilitate more content where the children can actually tell us what they want. I know when Councillor Amir and I went to one of the primary school, they weren't aware that they could actually have some content or some input into the council plan, and boy did we have some numbers and do we have some pens and papers floating around. So I think I want to welcome the idea of having the daytime meetings for our children and our future to participate. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any... Yes?
My question is, because Councillor Messina has brought up that we're only losing one meeting from 16 to 15. Can I get clarification on how many we are getting this year as opposed to the following year? Because I think that's important, that how many we're actually going to from.
Okay,
Thank you.
Councillor Messina was making... was putting forward a scenario. She wasn't saying we're losing one meeting, but we'll ask the officers, how many meetings do we have this year and how many compared to how many that are being proposed?
Through you, councillors. So at the moment, council's on a 3-weekly cycle, and that's what's proposed here. This year, if council decides as part of this resolution to set a council meeting on the 3rd of December, you will have had 14 ordinary meetings. Next year, the proposal is to have 15 ordinary meetings. That of course doesn't include special council meetings to hear submissions, budget, and the mayoral election also.
So technically we're not losing any meetings?
No. Okay, are there any further speakers? No? Councillor Rennie, would you like the right of reply?
Yes, just because I think there were a number of things said that actually were inaccurate. And so while other speeches were going on, I was busy counting council meetings, and note that this is our 13th ordinary council meeting for the year, and that in addition we've had 2 special council meetings, and I would anticipate next year if things come up we will have special council meetings to deal with them. So it is simply untrue to say there is any decline in the number of council meetings that will be offered next year with this schedule, and I think what we have demonstrated is that we have a very community-friendly council meeting set up. We always extend public question time if, there's never been a single occasion when we haven't extended public question time to enable all community members to ask their questions. People are given time, they're given new opportunities to participate in making submissions prior to items being heard. And I think that we have to be very careful not to promulgate myths about what's actually happening here. And in addition, we are now looking to have a couple of daytime meetings to increase our coverage and our reach to people in our community. They won't just benefit school children, they may well benefit other members of the community who can't make it out at night. So I think we're being more inclusive and actually reaching larger numbers of people than ever before.
Thank you. I will now put that to the vote. All those in favour? And against? And abstained? Okay, motion is carried. The next item is 8.8, proposed lease for the former Reservoir Library. Moved by Councillor Amir, second by Councillor Williams. Councillor Amir.
So the proposal here is to lease the former Reservoir library for staff working on the level crossing removal in Reservoir. So this is the site that is currently not being used by council, and it seems like a really great opportunity. It would mean that there'd be an income from John Holland, in this case, who are undertaking the project, to council. There'd be up to 100 staff on site, and it would mean that those staff would be very close to the site of the level crossing removal, would be well in touch with what's happening on the ground, and also in a time when we do anticipate there may be impacts or perceived impacts on local businesses with the level crossing removal works happening. It would be really great to have those 100 staff in the area, buying coffees, buying lunches, keeping the area busy and supporting those local businesses while making good use of a space. So we're expecting some refurbishment works will be at the cost of those leasing the site, and so I'm happy that this is something that we can offer, which seems to be absolutely a win-win situation.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
This is a fantastic opportunity I think Council has at hand. We have the new railway system level crossing that's actually going to take place. Obviously, it's right through from Bell Street to now Reservoir, and I think it's really important that that we do have the workers that will be working from John Holland, who would like to hire out on behalf of LXRA, which will be doing the works of the level crossing, that they do have somewhere that they can congregate together and have their lunches together. So they have come to council and have actually asked if they could have the old Reservoir library site, and what that will do with that site, they will actually do refurnishments of asbestos removal. They'll actually update the heating and cooling system, the new flooring, they'll do some painting, a new kitchen, additional bathrooms, and network cabling. They will do a whole heap of things that for a building that's actually been sitting there the last few years, that's just actually deteriorating and going down. So to be honest, it's actually giving it a new release of life, which I think is really important, and it's definitely a council asset that we can utilise later down the track again. So I think that I highly recommend officers that have put this report together, and obviously working tirelessly to ensure that this goes ahead, because I think it's a win-win for everybody, because if LXR are actually in the area of the Reservoir, I think that they will shop, eat and corrugate in the area more often, and they'll stay longer, and I think that's of only benefit to the businesses in the area. So thank you to all.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to make a few points. I think the other councillors have covered the issue. I think what needs to be underlined here is that this is not a final decision on this matter. There will be a further report coming back to council after we put this issue out to the public and see submissions in regards to what's been proposed there. I think it's a great opportunity, as it's been mentioned. I think it could provide a boost to the traders there by having extra people in and around the area that do their shopping, go for lunch, and there's a lot more foot traffic there along both the Edward Street, and also, and I'm sure that Broadway will also benefit. Also, I think the other benefit that this will have, that is that after, if the project does go ahead, after that given that the asbestos is going to be removed, it's going to be refurbished, that the centre could be used then for some form of community facility after the LXRA finish their work there. The other final point I'd just like to make is that there's also a slight downside, and then I think it's been, some traders have also mentioned this to me, and it's the issue of parking, and that we need to really pay attention to the submissions that come through, particularly around this issue, if there are submissions around this issue, and that then when we, if we make that decision of leasing it to the to John Holland group, that we also address the parking issues associated with that, because whilst it's a boost and it's a benefit for the traders, but we don't want it also to impinge on the traders in that their normal shoppers can't find adequate parking in and around that area. So I look forward to the submissions so that we can actually work through some of the detail of this, and I finally look forward that this rail crossing is finally going to be built.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Any other speakers? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Motion's carried unanimously. Next item is 8.9, WH Robinson Reserve Sports Pavilion awarding of contract CT 2018-78, completion of extensions, refurbishment works.
Happy to move then.
So there's some blanks there that need to be filled in.
Wasn't that part of the green?
So it's in the confidential.
Can we?
So as per the confidential recommendation?
Yeah.
Yep. So we'll pop those numbers in? Yep.
So we can mention...
We can put the numbers in, yep. Yep.
Sorry.
So that's moved by Councillor Williams, seconded by Councillor Rennie. We'll just wait for it to come up on screen. There we go. Okay, Councillor Williams.
Okay, so the issue that has occurred down at WH Robertson Reserve Pavilion is that there was a contractor that was doing the refurnishment down at the pavilions down there, and sadly the contractor has actually gone into liquidation. So council has stepped in and has looked at in other ways of how we can rectify the issue. So we have gone into looking at different contractors, and obviously we had, I think it was 4 or 5, and it has actually now been awarded to Sherwood Construction Solutions for the cost of $631,023. Now this work has been outstanding for some time, and hopefully that the new constructor will actually get on board ASAP, and the finish of the works will actually finish in June 2019, and then hopefully the sporting clubs can actually finally get back into their home and utilise that pavilion again, which would be fantastic. The second part of it was the continuous amount, which we have there is $89,650, as approximately 10% of the contract amount to be used required for variations of other unforeseen items as part of the contract. And that's pretty much straightforward. And I don't think there's anything else that I nearly stipulate. But I also want to say thank you to the officers for putting this together, and the contractors, which I noticed that were of a very nearby vicinity, they were either Reservoir, Preston, Heidelberg area. So I think I take my hat off to those who have actually, it's nice to know that those who are working, living and playing in the area, but also that we are hiring contractors that are obviously in the nearby area or in Durban.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Rennie.
I think there will be many, many families and coaches and others involved in the sporting club that uses this pavilion who'll be very happy to know that we've engaged another contractor tonight. I echo Councillor Williams' sentiments in terms of how nice it is to see local contractors, and Sherwood Consulting Solutions are a Preston-based company, and that's fantastic. I think it will give them all the more reason to want to actually do a fantastic job, because this is their community, and I think that's always a good outcome. I note that in determining who is the successful tenderer, there were a number of evaluation criteria that were used, and they included price, methodology, program experience, the capability and team of key personnel, and local business content. And it was actually really good to see that this was a terrifically competitive process, and Sherwood Construction Solutions came out on top. So we look forward to seeing this building project get moving, and I think the club will be delighted to see action and know that the work that was commenced is going to be finished off.
Thank you. Councillor Messina.
I would like to ask a few questions, and I want to point out the procurement process, the checks and references that were carried out. I note that on the 21st of November 2017...
Is this a question?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Yep.
I note that on the 21st of November 2017, the company entered into liquidation, and on the 12th of June the contract was signed on the 21st of November 2017, yet 7 months later that company entered into liquidation. My question is in terms of the checks and balances and what exposure, what are we doing for the future so we don't have that exposure to council's bottom line?
Yep. Mr Albertini.
For you, Mayor Lucerne. We are now looking at financial checks on the contractors themselves. So if you read the report, you'd see we've done a financial assessment as well as also looking at all their references and experience as well as one of the criteria.
Sorry, thank you. So I'm right to ascertain that in future our risk exposure will be minimal based on those checks and processes?
Yeah, for you, Mayor Lucerne. Yes, that's right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers? No, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? That motion is carried unanimously. Item 9 is consideration of responses to petitions, notices of motion and general business. There are none.
Sorry, did we miss 8.10?
Oh, I just crossed off the wrong one, sorry. 8.10. Thank you, everybody. You were checking. People are still listening. Proposed transfer of roads and reserves from State Trustees Limited.
Happy to move that.
Councillor McCarthy. Councillor McCarthy was on his feet and Councillor Greco will second. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I've actually moved the last one of these State Trustees items as well, so that's my new nickname, State Trustee Receiver. This item actually refers to a subdivision that I'll just get the date here. Was prior to 1986. We have a process, obviously, at the moment where we have state authorities, in this case, state trustees, who need to transfer title to council, and in this case, was in relation to property that is in the name of deceased persons. In terms of the process, as you can see, there has been a process that's been undertaken to actually look at this. What we are doing this evening is actually authorising our Chief Executive Officer to execute the documents to enable that that transfer to come to council. And obviously, once those assets are referred to council, they then become the responsibility of council from a maintenance point of view. So it is important for us to go through the proper processes when we undertake these decision making, and from time to time this does occur. This is only one of several, I think, in my time on council where we've received these sorts of parcels from another agency, but it's always welcome and we can see what we can do from there.
Thank you. Councillor Greco. Nothing further. Anyone else want to add anything? No? I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Motion's carried unanimously. Item 9 we'll go to now, that I read before. There is none. So we'll move to item 10, notices of motion. 10.1, establishment of sporting club partnership agreement program. Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move this motion and seeking a seconder.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Williams. Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Williams. Look, I'm putting forward this motion, councillors, is that I think it's an important motion, given the decisions that we have made at a previous council meeting, because I think the decision that we did make at a previous council meeting was a very good decision because it actually put in play a whole new way of actually establishing partnerships with some of our sporting clubs in order to achieve some of our social objectives in terms of increasing the participation of underrepresented groups in planned activity sports across the city. As it was mentioned at the previous meeting, I think by Councillor McCarthy, was that it was quite a revolutionary approach that we were taking, and I fully agree with that. And I think that the current policies that we have in terms of encouraging the participation of vulnerable groups, marginalised groups, women, people with disabilities, it's too incremental. I've been on council for 10 years and we haven't really seen a substantial shift. We've made lots of efforts. There has been improvement, but we have not seen a substantial, dramatic shift in relation to the participation levels of marginalised groups. It's not just a good thing to do. I think it's an obligation on our part that everyone in our community has the opportunity to participate in ratepayer-funded sporting facilities, as with the, if you like, the mainstream community. So I think that what this motion does is that it's seeking a report. We're not actually making a decision of establishing the program, but we're seeking a report in terms of how we could establish some sort of program that takes from the initiative that we had with the Durban Falcons and how we can extend that to other clubs. I think it's something that it's worthwhile for us to pursue. We could start small in terms of talking to other, because I noticed that at many other clubs, some have approached me sort of saying, well, what about us? You know, we have marginalised people in our clubs, we have women in our clubs, and we would like to participate with council in terms of ensuring that the participation rates of the marginalised groups or the underrepresented groups is actually increased. Clubs can't do it themselves. As we know, they all run on the smell of an oily rag, and this really would meet and be in alignment with council's policies. So, look, I hope we could take all the commotion away from what's been proposed there, and that we get our officers just to nut it out to see how it could work and how we can apply this with some sort of criteria across the sporting clubs in our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Councillor Williams. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Winnie.
Thank you. I'm going to speak against this motion for two reasons. Firstly, because I think there are process issues in terms of how we go about doing things in council. And secondly, because I think there are content issues with regards to the debate that we had several weeks ago and the fact that we knew that the arrangement we went into with the Falcons was not the type of arrangement that we typically go into or one that we were looking to go into with other clubs. But I'd like to start with the process issues. I think this motion is actually calling for much more than a report because it talks about wide consultation. And I think if you go out and do that kind of consultation, you set an expectation with clubs that we may not be able to deliver. I think it's also important to note that council already significantly subsidises most sporting clubs in Durban through subsidised access to sporting fields, and it is my understanding that clubs receive a greater subsidy if they are able to demonstrate inclusion policies for women, for people with disabilities and for people from diverse backgrounds. So we actually have a comprehensive program in this area to drive up participation rates by marginalised people. Further, in terms of process, I think because this talks about a wide consultation process, there are significant budgetary implications to going ahead with this motion. We have all received in the last couple of weeks copies of these forms. It's the councillor request form to put through the budget process. And I think if councillors have ideas, we've been encouraged to fill out that form so that it can be costed, so that it can come back to us for a robust discussion about whether this is actually the direction we want to take. And I would suggest that that is the appropriate place to list this idea rather than in the council chamber, which sends us off actually engaging in a course of action that firstly, I think, raises expectations in the community that may not be met, but also requires significant resource investment from council officers.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Williams.
Over the years, I've seen clubs grow, girls and women getting involved, females playing that once was only played by males. The Durban Falcons are an exceptional elite sporting club, and they have achieved this with hard work and community connection. And I haven't got a bad word, and I think that they've done exceptionally well by themselves. But I believe, in reference to this notice of motion, that it would be nice to see that I in my heart believe that all clubs have something to give and something to offer and can be outstanding and possibly can be elite also. I would like to see Durban Council to work with clubs to see what sort of niche or area that they could grow to maybe make them elite or different to another club. Not just being inclusive, but something special and unique about them particularly. And possibly maybe a particular club that might be elite in one area, another club might be just for special needs, or another club might be for obviously a much older generation, maybe for people over 55 or something. I just like to see us getting more people playing sport, no matter what your gender is, no matter what your special needs are, no matter what your preference is in life. It'd be nice to get in as many people playing sport, because we do know the benefits that it has. So it'd just be nice that I welcome the notice of motion, and I can see how that we can change the mentality of our sporting clubs, but possibly even council and council officers.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Greco, would you like the right of reply? Sorry. Oh, okay. I called for speakers and went to Councillor Williams because she wanted to reserve her right. Councillor Messina.
Thank you. I think it's important to note that when I raised my hand to agree with the Durban Falcons proposal partnership, I did so on the premises that we would look at a strategy and we would look at a forward planning, and we only agreed to 2 years. And although I agree with moving forward on this particular motion, I cannot support it only on the basis of that. I'd like to see a strategic plan moving forward. I want to just sit there and bill money out to every club that wants to put up their hand because they have a special need. I want to see a much more profound framework moving forward, and I would like to see that being implemented with the Durban Falcons after the first 2 years as well. So just wanted to important note that I wanted to say that.
Thank you, Councillor Messina. Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I'll just make the following points in relation to the speakers against. The point was raised about process issues. I'd just like to point out that in relation to the application or the submission that was made to us from the Durban Falcons, I'm glad that they came in. That was outside of our normal processes, but we were able to consider it and able to make a decision. So there's certain things that actually fall out of the box that we are in a position to deal with, because otherwise if we allow ourselves to be dictated by process, we don't achieve the dramatic changes that we need to achieve. The other point that I'd like to make is that what's been proposed there is a report. Why it's in relation to why the second point about consultation, it's not to raise expectations to the community, but it's actually to engage the sporting clubs to try and work out how this practically could be done, and so that we can manage those expectations with the broader community. And I think that you want to involve the clubs that are going to possibly take advantage of something like this in the actual design or in the actual consideration of something of a program, of a partnership program. I think also is that, we really need to be bold, councillors, because, look, I've been involved in the multicultural space for probably about 40 years now, and we haven't seen that dramatic shift. It's too incremental. It doesn't happen. I've been involved in council for 10 years, and even before council on the Durban Ethnic Communities Council. The shift is too slow, councillors. We need something a little bit more revolutionary and a little bit more dramatic in terms of increasing that participation levels of people from marginalised groups. I don't want the next generation to go through what I went through when I was shooed off football grounds and soccer grounds and cricket grounds because I was not able to be a member of those clubs for a multitude of reasons. And also, in the last point I would raise is in terms of the profound framework that we need. I think the consultation process with the clubs enables us to actually have a conversation with the clubs to see how we could put something in place. And I'll end up on this note, and just what councils really to reflect on this, and just to remove all the all the unnecessary noise that's associated with this particular issue.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. I'll now put it to the vote. All those in favour and against? Motion is lost. The next item is 10.2, establishment of a subsidised basic garden maintenance program for residents on low incomes who are incapacitated.
Mayor, look, I'll move that motion with a slight amendment is that the council receives a report as part of the 2018-19 budget process on options to on establishing, etc., etc.
Okay. Seconded by Councillor Messina. Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for seconding the motion. Look, again, I'm proposing this because it's really an issue that's been coming up more and more, I find, in my life here as a councillor. I'm sure many councillors, nearly all of us, would have received requests, particularly from our ageing community or a community that is facing some sort of incapacity of getting some service from the council, or some subsidised service, or some facilitated service from the council for the community to actually assist them in maintaining their gardens or maintaining their lawns and things like that. It's not exactly an issue that it's in a sense like an indulgence on the part of the council in providing this service. I know that the Whittlesea Council has a particular program that assists pensioners or people on fixed incomes that have an incapacity to actually maintain their own homes, their own gardens, and that the Whittlesea Council does provide a minimal service once you meet a criteria for council to actually facilitate or supplement the upkeep of their homes. Why this is important, councillors? I mean, we often talk about how we want to keep our ageing residents in their home, but we want to keep them in their home with a sense of dignity. There are many residents that have maintained their house in a nice, neat and orderly manner, and not only have they maintained their houses in a nice, neat and orderly manner in terms of the garden, but they've also maintained council footpaths and mowed lawns for decades and decades and decades. And now when they ask for something back because they are incapacitated and they can't do that, it's a bit difficult to constantly say to residents, look, we don't provide that service, and that we can't help them. I think we should really investigate this, try to introduce it, perhaps in a minimal way, make the criteria as tight as possible so that people don't actually take advantage of something like this. And I think it will restore some hope, some dignity in relation to people who are making maximum effort to stay at home and not ending up in a nursing home. And we see some of the criticisms that nursing homes have received. So I urge councillors to consider this. We could consider this as part of the budget process, cost it out, map it out, place a criteria around it, and then hopefully implement something in the next financial year.
Thank you. Councillor Messina.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. I'm going to support this, but can I just tell you that I actually have followed process, and I actually submitted this as part of the project for the next budget. But I'm happy to support it only because I've actually followed the process and put it in as a submission. I don't know whether I should talk about the aged care, but we talk about vulnerable. I'm going to talk about low incomes and incapacitated rather than aged care because I don't want to be put in an area where there could be perhaps be a conflict of interest. I know that health and wellbeing is very much on our plan, and we do focus on it here at council, and there's nothing like having a resident who is so proud of their garden, whether it's the garden that produces fruit and vegetables or a garden that has their lovely rose bushes. And as they're ageing or they're incapacitated and they may have some sort of disability, they can't tend to their garden. So having a subsidised program that actually has strict criteria, which is perhaps looking at a low income level and perhaps an asset base as well, I welcome that process and note that I have put it in as a project in the budget submission.
Thank you, Councillor Messina. Just to clarify, Councillor Greco, I think you said 18-19 budget process, but you meant 19-20, the upcoming budget process. Yes, yeah. So we've just put that up on the screen. Councillor Wibbs.
I too also fully support this notice of motion. On previous council, where only a couple of us were on that council at the time, actually officers, we had would have a budget where we would allow to clean people's windows and gutters. And I believe that was ceased. I can't remember reasons being whether it was contracted. We still do it. Oh, that's great. Great news. Sorry. Anyway, this would be great because we are finding, particularly as people are getting older, are struggling. And they sometimes just need that a bit of assistance, especially if they've had a fall or come out of hospital. It's to do some just basic gardening. It doesn't mean that it's a permanent issue that we'll be continued doing for many, many years. It's obviously until other processes are put in place. And I think that's a great initiative for this notice of motion. So thank you, Councillor Greco.
Thank you. Councillor Rennie.
I have a question through you, Mayor Lassurf, if I could, probably to Ms Henderson, which is to ask, what services do our aged care programs currently deliver in this area, if any?
Ms Henderson.
Through you, Mayor Lassurf, I don't believe that we currently offer home gardening assistance, I don't think we do. And this motion, of course, would extend it beyond people over 65 as well.
Thank you.
Mayor, could I just offer also an answer to the question from because I've done some research in this. I'll just give you.
Okay, go. A sentence.
We do have a service, but it's a service in relation to only if there is a fire hazard or there is an occupational health and safety hazard. That's the only time that council will go in and
so we do that
mow
service
a lawn
when,
or fix a place. So it's in exceptional circumstances.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Rennie.
I confess to being somewhat ambivalent about this, and that's mainly because in the context of the age-friendly review that we're undertaking, we're actually looking at the sorts of services that we deliver to older people. I do understand this is broader than just older people, but looking at what those services are and council's role in the delivery of those services. And I actually really want to get an answer to that question about what is the best way in which we can assist people to stay in their homes. You know, this is in some ways an extension of the kind of window cleaning, gutter cleaning programs that we undertake. And I am very keen to hear, before we embark down the road of introducing more services, to actually understand how to maintain the services that we have, if that is what the Aged Care Friendly Review suggests we should do. So I think on the basis that we are waiting for a review process to actually inform what we do in the area of service delivery, I want to get that back before I embark us on a process of thinking about more services. I do understand that this is to go into the budget process, and it may well be that it gets supported because it doesn't actually commit us to anything, it goes through a budget process. But in any budget process, I would be looking very closely at, you know, where are we heading with the age-friendly review? What are we going to be delivering? How are we going to be delivering it? And you know, how does it impact on our finances? What's our capacity to make sure that it's fair and equitable and the people who most need assistance get it?
Thank you. Are there any further speakers?
Can I say something after a statement?
No. Councillor Greco has the right of reply.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I just make the point again that we're seeking a report for the budget process. You know, I've been a councillor for 10 years now, and constantly these demands get made by our ageing community, but not only by our ageing community, by our community members of the community who are incapacitated. And I think it's worthy for us, instead of just sort of brushing it off or ignoring this, that we seriously look at it, consider it, look at examples of other councils, like I mentioned, the Whittlesea Council, and then seeing whether we can add this to our suite of services that we provide to our ageing community, which is a growing community in our city. So let's ask our officers to do some work in relation to this space. They have the expertise, and then we can consider it as we deliberate on the financial implications of such a service.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. I'll now put it to the vote. All those in favour and against? Motion is carried. Next item is 10.3, update on Welcoming Cities project.
Mayor, look, I'd like to withdraw this motion, and I apologise for not withdrawing it earlier because just been a little bit busy over these last few weeks.
No worries, thank you, Councillor Greco. Next item is 10.4, update on planning review process.
This one I actually want to talk about.
Look, you move it as is?
Yeah, do I have a seconder? Yeah.
Yep, is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Councillor. Look, why I've put this is that when we were elected as in this term of council, one of our big promises, if you like, or commitments, was that we were going to review the planning process. As we know, Councillor McCarthy will remember this, and also Councillor Williams from the previous council, there's lots of criticism around our planning regulations, our planning rules, and that we were going to embark, and we actually passed a motion saying that we were going to review the planning process. Look, I appreciate and I understand, given all the restructuring that's occurred, that some things have not proceeded as fast as they ought to have proceeded. And I appreciate that and I understand that. But I suppose where my concern is, and this is and some of the representation that I'm getting from community members, is that when we decided to embark on this process, we wanted to embark on this process with community input and participation. Because one of the angst that we often get as a council is that the community feel that planning, that they feel disenfranchised by the planning process. So I think the intent was, when we originally passed the motion to review this process, is to engage the community. And when you engage the community, it's a double-edged sword also for the community. It's not a one-way, we all appreciate it's not a one-way street for the community in getting everything that they want around planning, because there are certain limitations around planning. There are public interest questions and things like that. But we need to engage the community. And the community need to feel that they are part of the process and the conversation of developing a new planning scheme for our city. The other thing too, that when we originally passed the motion, I think over 12 months ago, more than 12 months ago, I think it was one of the first motions that we passed as a new council, and it was unanimously passed, was that we would set up a working group in order to work through some of the issues associated with the planning review, a bit like the way that we set up working groups to establish other key initiatives of the council. I haven't seen that working group perform its task, and I'm hoping that we could actually get that back onto rails so that we can provide, as councillors, some sort of guidance and some sort of direction, if you like, to our officers in the conduct of this planning review. And finally, I would just say I appreciate and I understand that some of the work has been done, some of the technical work around the planning review has been done, that is required by legislation, but I think we need to provide a report back to the community in relation to the consultation phase and the public interface that we're going to have with the community over reviewing the overall planning scheme. Stop there.
Thank you. Councillor McCarthy.
I'll reserve my right at this stage.
Are there any further speakers? Councillor McCarthy.
Nothing to add.
Okay. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Motion is carried unanimously. Unanimously. Item 10.5.
I'll move that as the proposer.
Moved by Councillor McCarthy. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Rennie. Councillor McCarthy.
Mayor, I just have some questions in relation to this particular item, if I may.
Should we hear from the mover and seconder first? We have. We'll go to the questions, yes?
Yeah, I just got a series of questions, if I may, and maybe we could just go through them one by one. I suppose the first question is that this motion, which seeks to amend a previous motion and basically reverse a previous motion, in essence, it's a rescission of a previous motion. And why is this motion being accepted when it's actually, and it has not gone through the rescission process that it should have gone through in order for it to be actually considered.
So the local law actually says that you can either amend or revoke a motion, and they're dealt with within the same provision of the local law. I don't know if the CEO wants to add to that. Okay. It's 37, page 16.
Through you, Madam Mayor, you're right. So the local law specifically provides for the revocation or amendment of resolutions and indicates that it can only be done via a notice of motion or by a report by an officer included in the agenda, and so this was submitted as a notice of motion and meets the criteria.
Okay, my next question then is that if this is an amendment to a previous motion, because the nature of the amendment is contradictory to the intent and to the content of the previous motion, how can it be accepted as an amendment to the previous motion?
CEO?
Through you, Madam Mayor, so the section of the relevant section of the local law is titled Revocation and Amendment. So it's one or the other. So if it's not an amendment and your view is that it's a revocation, then either way it meets the criteria.
I just need a further clarification of that. Look, I understand what an amendment is, and I understand the local laws talk about revocation or amendment, but because this motion is worded as an amendment, I hold that this should not be accepted as an amendment.
Councillor Greco, I guess the question to the CEO is, do the rules of an amendment within the local law apply to this motion, to amend a previous notice of motion? Does that make sense? Because there is the provision within the local law that any amendment to a motion cannot be opposite of the original motion. So yeah. And then the next question is this opposite to the original motion?
So, through you, Mayor, the provision around moving an amendment at Clause 28 of the local law refers to a motion, not a resolution. Okay. And I think that's the distinction in the local law. I think that's the technical distinction.
Okay, so that means that the local law that applies at moving an amendment, Section 28, does not apply to Section 37 to a resolution. Is that what you... Yes. Yep, okay.
Sorry, through you, Mayor Lassurf. Yes, that is my view because of the inclusion of provision Clause 37 of the local law that specifically provides for this circumstance. So it overtly expresses the ability to revoke or amend a resolution. So
change the nature
the
of...
resolution is different to an amendment. It's not something that's going on in live debate.
Yep, okay. Thank you.
Just therefore seek some clarification. Therefore, just for my understanding and for councillors' understanding, is that all the motions that were passed tonight, if a councillor were to put in a similar motion of amending or revoking, that could happen at the next meeting as a result of what we're saying now.
You can always amend or revoke a resolution of the council.
Yeah, just to be clear on that, so therefore decisions that were made tonight can be brought up at the next meeting and seek a revocation or an amendment to those decisions.
Yes. By notice of motion, as long as the notice of motion is submitted with accordance to the rules of notice of motion. Yeah.
Through you, Mayor Lassurf, that's right. So in the past, Councillor Greco, you'd know that there, and I suspect this is true of this local law as well, prior to this version, there would have been a rescission provision, which is really standard in local laws. The rescission provision doesn't exist in this current version of the local law. So In truth, that provision has always existed, and various councils have various requirements around rescission motions, such that it doesn't have to have been acted. If it was acted on, you can't do a rescission, etc. Those provisions are not included in council's local law, governance local law at this time. So technically, that's true. I won't express an opinion about whether I think it's good practice.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. Just some further questions. Look, I note that we passed that motion, and I think there was an overwhelming support for that motion. I think we all voted in favour of it. I know that there was a few councillors that were not in the room, but I think most of us, nearly all of us, passed the motion. So what I want to understand is that in the debate, it was also stressed that we would need... Sorry. I'll get to the question that we would need to write to the minister as quickly as possible. So the motion was passed on the 15th. I note here that Councillor McCarthy has put the notice of motion on the 24th. Why did 9 days elapse, and that both the mayor and the administration did not take any action in writing a letter to the relevant minister?
Ms. Olivier.
Through you, Mayor Lasserf. So it's correct that we hadn't finalised a letter to the minister in the time before we received the notice of motion. We had acted on the resolution, and that we'd notified our colleagues in the state government of the resolution. Essentially, I got some advice when I received the notice of motion about how to proceed at that point, and was advised that if the sort of best practice across local government is that if not taking further action doesn't change the outcome, that you would wait till the matter's resolved, and that you've got a clear position at the end of that time. But you would continue to act if it makes a material difference to the outcome. So, for example, if you had an event in the next 2 days that you were promoting, you would continue to act. But in this case, the height controls are in place till the middle of June 2019, and my assessment was that allowing this to be resolved wouldn't affect the outcome of that.
Thank you.
I just got some further questions. So I'm just trying to understand what happened between the 15th and the 24th. A motion was passed. I didn't see any other events taking place, both on the part of the state government or whoever.
Sorry, can you be more specific about your question?
But I'm just trying to understand what events took place between the 15th and the 24th that could have possibly have hindered the letter going out to the minister.
Can you please respond? Yep.
Through you, Mayor Lasserf. We were in the process of drafting that letter. We had notified our colleagues through email, so they were certainly aware of Council's decision. And it was essentially the normal drafting process with all the other work that happens day to day. And next time I would aim to turn that around faster.
Thank you.
And just finally, as a final question, given that I was the mover of the motion, why wasn't there any communication with me about, in relation to the hold-up that there was between the 15th and the 24th? I would have liked to have at least had a courtesy to be told that there was some hold-up in relation to passing. Because I stressed the point.
There's a question there. I don't know. We don't need the context in the back. We've heard the background and the context. I'll get the CEO to respond because you've had a really good run of these questions. Ms. Wilkinson.
Through you, Mayor Lasserf. Irrespective of who the mover is and who the seconder is and who votes for matters and who doesn't vote for matters, once an item is a resolution of council, it's treated equally. at that council meeting, you would be aware there were many items that were considered in the context of our already overloaded work plan. So it was 7 working days, 7 business days. So I would like for us to do better. At this point, we're not doing better than that, Councillor Greco. That's something that we're working on very hard as an organisation, but none of the actions out of that council meeting, or very few of them, would have been actioned within 7 days of the council resolution. It is good practice to wait until the minutes have been finalised in draft, and so that's a couple of days, but it wasn't that this was missed or overlooked. It is just a workload question, and you are aware how many items came out of that council meeting. So, and I think there was something like 8 noms, for example, that were considered that night, not all of which got up, but, they all create a piece of work. So it's not something that occurred, it's not something that I would consider that had been delayed, it just hadn't been actioned. So it's not something that was missed or delayed deliberately. If that's the concern, that's certainly not the concern, not the experience. It's just that these things take a week.
And just the final question is that I'd just like to understand whether there was any communication between yourself, the Mayor, and Councillor McCarthy, or between Councillor McCarthy and the officers in that time in relation to the formulation of this motion that's here before us.
I'm happy to answer that question. I voted against the motion, and Councillor McCarthy asked me why I voted against the motion. I explained to him why, and then he decided to put forward this motion. And that happened as I walked out of the chamber of the last meeting. So on the Monday 3 weeks ago, or whenever it was, I had indicated my concerns about that motion.
And the second part of my question was whether there was any communication between Councillor McCarthy and the officers.
Through you, Mayor Lasseff, yes, as there are with almost every nom that's drafted, once it's received in draft form from councillors. As you know, Councillor Greco, we often call to talk or to clarify, to strengthen language, to make sure that things are as lawful or, able to be implemented, and to provide advice about any concerns that officers might have. So, yes, I certainly did speak with Councillor McCarthy one night briefly in the car on my way to an event. And I know Ms Olivier's did work with Councillor McCarthy on the wording after the intent was lodged.
Councillor McCarthy, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you. Never had so much talk about me in any council meeting in my life. It's been an interesting night. Look, to provide some clarity for councillors, been lots of questions about this one, but this really comes down to a matter of logic, and I take the point, and the point which I think Councillor Greco brought forward was a noble one in the sense of trying to provide the security that the community seeks in relation to the future proposed height of Preston Market. What I didn't recognise in voting for it, and I think probably other councillors might not have been aware, is that in doing so, we actually have missed an important step in this process, which is that we are undertaking a process at the moment where we are looking at what is the appropriate future height, what is the appropriate future shape and space. And I would like to see a whole range of options considered in relation to preserving and protecting the future viability of Preston Market. But we missed a really important point, which is that you don't go in and ask for permanent controls, interim controls to be made permanent when the interim controls themselves, in fact, expire on the 30th of June 2019. It is premature, in fact, to request permanent controls when those current controls actually expire in 7 months. If the Minister was unwilling or is unwilling to grant an extension to the current controls beyond the current review process, and there is a process in place in partnership with the VPA, as the motion outlines, then there's no chance that the Minister is going to support the request that was put forward in that motion. The request also makes a couple of points which I actually think are problematic, one of which was to assert that the market should be in the current footprint, in the current shape, and at the current height. That's problematic when you consider that the future viability of this market may in fact involve locating the market in a different part of the site on an expanded footprint with a different height ratio. I want to see Preston Market thrive into the future, but I don't want to create a situation where we do not have those interim controls in the life of this review. So we don't know how long exactly this process will take place before we get permanent controls across the whole site through the VPA and through the Minister. But there is a deadline looming, which is the 30th of June 2019. If we do not see an extension of the interim controls, then there is a gap. So let's work logically to actually get in place an extension of the interim controls until after that review is completed. And at that stage, we'll actually know what the community thinks in relation to all the options that have been outlined. We'll be in a much stronger position to assert whatever is the proposed future footprint and height of Preston Market, but we need to get those interim controls extended, and that's the priority right now.
Thank you. Councillor Rennie.
I thank Councillor McCarthy for putting forth this notice of motion. And I'd have to say that I regret that I wasn't attentive enough to the wording of the motion that was passed at the last council meeting. And I apologise for that to Councillor Greco as much as to anyone, because what it meant is that the intent of his motion was not met by my intent with voting for it. So I thank Councillor McCarthy for the clarification that we're seeking that these controls be extended until such time as the VPA process has been completed and that we have that plan. And I think that it is important that we get this right. And it's very important because if we don't get this right and if we make decisions that undermine other processes, we actually lose credibility with the VPA. And when we lose credibility, we lose influence. And thus far, we've worked very effectively with them because we're all striving to get the same outcome, which is a vibrant and viable Preston Market now and into the future. And I believe that having invested so much in the VPA process, that it would be wrong of us to do anything that undermined it. And I think inadvertently that motion that was passed by the last council meeting undermined it. And I think that the motion that Councillor McCarthy has put forward today will actually correct that and make the intention that I suspect was shared by many of us much clearer.
Are there any further speakers? Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I'd just like to make a couple of points in relation to what is here before us. You know, what we have before us is basically a reversal of a motion which was carried by, I think, nearly everyone in this room, bar, I think, Councillor Amir, who happened not to be in the room when the decision was made.
I voted against that.
Sorry?
I voted against the motion.
Yes, I know that. Yeah. I said virtually everyone, yes. And so I'm just astounded to see this motion come back to us to actually reverse a previous motion. I think it sets a really bad precedent, because then that would mean then that at future meetings, if I'm not happy with a decision, and I haven't been happy with many decisions that council has been making, that I would come back to the next council meeting with a similar notice of motion saying, let's have another look at what we previously decided. That creates a lot of uncertainty in relation, in the eyes of the community and in the eyes of the particular stakeholders. Also, what this motion does in terms of its substance is that it shows a lack of commitment to protecting the market. We're in a phase of caretaker government with the state government. We don't know who's going to win. And this was our last opportunity with the existing government to try and seek some permanent controls over the market. And when I say permanent controls, we all know that the controls can be permanent, but then in the future, they also, even permanent controls can be changed and signed off in a different manner. But at least it would show on our part a certain advocacy in terms of protecting the market. I think that if we were to pass this motion, we would lose credibility with traders, with shoppers, and with the community in regards to saving the market. We all say, and I continue to say this often, that we all love the market, but here is another example of us not showing our commitment towards actually saving this market. And I'm really astounded to see on the part of councillors their intention of a change of heart in relation to actually saving the market.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Are there any further speakers? Councillor McCarthy, would you like the right of reply?
I would, and I'd like to completely reject the line that Councillor Greco has put forward, that by passing this, councillors are not intent on saving the market. That contention is preposterous and is not borne out at all by what we have before us. What we have before us is actually about doing things well and getting the best possible outcome. If you think that the Minister was going to approve permanent controls on the cusp of an election after having authorised a VPA process and having those interim controls in place until the 30th of June 2019, you're kidding yourself. To seriously think that the Minister is going to step in on the cusp of an election and undermine his own department, undermine his own process that he put in place because Darebin Council has sent him a motion, you've got to be joking. We need to get serious about this. We are trying to save Preston Market and what it is. If we are going to do that, we need to be a lot more clever than the motion that we passed at the last meeting. I regret voting for it because I didn't read it properly in terms of the intent that it actually delivered. I read it as actually providing that ongoing protection beyond the current review process. I know that there is no chance that the Minister is going to sign off on permanent controls when there's a review process that's looking at what the controls should be. So I would ask councillors, and I'd ask councillors to be clever about this, to understand that if the Minister does not support extending the interim controls beyond 30th of June 2019, then you will wake up on the 1st of July 2019 with no controls in place, no interim controls in place. You're back to square one. That's what's at stake here. So let's get something through that we have a pretty good chance of getting over the line, I'd like to think. And if we get that over the line, let's see what the review delivers in terms of a proposed permanent control. Then we've got something to advocate for with evidence and merit.
Thank you. I will now put that to the vote. All those in favour and against? Motion is carried.
Can my...
Yep, so if we could record Councillor Greco's opposition to the vote. Thank you. The next item is 10.6, Community Education and Business Opportunities during Level Crossing Removals. Councillor McCarthy, you move that?
Yep.
Seconded by Councillor Messina. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Councillor Messina. Councillors obviously would be rejoicing, I hope, that the long-running battle for us to gain a commitment from the current government to not only remove the Bell Crossing, which this council, in fact, under the leadership of Councillor Bowley a number of years ago, 2013, actually first put forward in this chamber. We were the first place to talk about removing Bell, and then we became the first place to talk about removing Oakover, Murray and Kramer. This is council's work that has delivered an advocacy outcome. A fantastic thing that we should be rejoicing about. But it is not good enough for us to have achieved those things over a sustained campaign over the last 6 years. It is now the time where we need to focus on what are we going to do beyond the current commitment that the government has made, if they're re-elected, to maximise those outcomes for our community. And if you think about the corridor, particularly along High Street, all the businesses there, the Preston businesses, the businesses at the Preston Market that we love so dearly, there is an enormous opportunity for them to benefit and to engage with this project, with the removal of those 4 level crossings, to benefit in such a way that they become integral to the activity, as has happened in other infrastructure projects in other parts of the state. So the proposal here is that we do right through the Mayor to the Level Crossing Removal Authority, which is the implementation body, and begin that process to really say we know about all the organisations, both community organisations, social enterprises, businesses, you name it, who are well placed to work with you and support your program. I think of everything from the wonderful Moon Rabbit Cafe at the bridge through to Melbourne Polytechnic, all the way down the corridor. We have an ecology of community and business that is ready to step up and support this project. We also have some wonderful businesses in our community, not along the trading corridor, but broadly in Darebin, who are ready to provide those skills, those abilities. Not everything is delivered by the major contractor in these projects, and it is an enormous economic development opportunity for our community. It's a training opportunity, particularly for young people, and it is the sort of project that is going to be taking place over a number of years, where we can see a range of different communities and businesses benefit. We are, of course, the owner of the originator of the Melbourne Innovation Centre. Wouldn't it be fantastic to see some of the inventive people in that organisation, as part of that organisation, having an opportunity to try things out in ways that we couldn't imagine? So the proposal here is really for us to get on the front foot, to make that proposal forward to the LXRA, to see what the opportunities are, and to deliver as much possible benefit to our community as we possibly can.
Thank you. Councillor Messina.
I just want to commend Councillor McCarthy on this notice of motion. First of all, there are many platforms and arenas that I look at, and one of them is economic development, followed by social enterprise and education, and this encompasses three of those areas. And I'm a firm believer that economic development fosters through to a healthy economy. Not only does it provide local jobs and also education, it provides money that we can spend more in the community. So it's a circular economy that excites me. I was teary when the announcement was made that should the Labor government actually win the election, we will get the 4 level crossing removals that we've been advocating for much before my time, and nothing makes more sense to me than having that open space and that corridor through the Durban Arts Centre right through to High Street. So I want to commend Councillor McCarthy for this, and I look forward to the development of well, first of all, the election result, and then the follow through with the development of that open space and what it means for Durban. This is an integral component. It's going to open up the core of Preston, and the explosion is going to be better than what's happening with Mount Entner at the moment. So I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Greco.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I've got a slight amendment, and I hope that Councillor McCarthy and the seconder would accept this, that not only in relation to the Bell package of level crossings, but to add the words at the end, and the reservoir level crossing.
Yep.
Because I think the same can apply.
Yep. So the mover and seconder accept that amendment, so we'll incorporate that
very happy to.
into the motion. Are there any further speakers?
Can
Councillor
I speak in relation to the motion?
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you. Look, I agree with everything that Councillor McCarthy has said, and I think we need to sort of underscore about what the how effective council advocacy has been around this issue. It started at the last council, even prior to the last council, both in relation to the Bell package, where council actually invested its own funds to develop a pre-feasibility study to actually show that it could be done, and that there would be savings for the state government in regards to, instead of doing 1 crossing, to do 4 crossings along that stretch there. And if it wasn't for council that actually embarked on that work, it would not have hit the radar for the Level Crossing Authority to actually imagine that could be done. So I commend the officers, prior officers and existing officers, for prosecuting that case. Also, the council advocacy has been very strong in relation to the reservoir crossing, something that we thought that was impossible to achieve, and what we've seen in the last few years, that is also become a reality, also as a result of the constant advocacy on the part of the council in making sure that those crossings get removed. And just finally, I just make the point is that I fully support the motion and the suggestions that have been made here by Councillor McCarthy, because I think there is a great opportunity both on the Bell Street end, on that end of town, but also in the reservoir end. I would even argue perhaps even more on the reservoir end, because it could open up and completely reimagine that landscape and that space. In regards to what we could possibly do there. And it would be good to involve other partners in relation to that and start that conversation with the Level Crossing Authority.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Motion is carried unanimously. Next item is 11, reports of standing committees. 11.1.
Mayor Lasif, do we need an extension of time?
Maybe. Would you like to propose a motion? We've got 10 minutes.
We might get through it, but for the sake of safety, can I propose an extension of time of 15 minutes?
Oh no, they're in blocks of 30. So
of 30 minutes?
Yeah. Moved by Councillor Rennie, seconded by Councillor McCarthy. All those in favour? Motion's carried. Okay, 11.1, Audit Committee Report.
I'm happy to move that.
Moved by Councillor Rennie, seconded by Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Rennie.
Thank you. These reports outline some of the issues that the Audit Committee has looked at in its meetings this year. I've had the pleasure of being part of the Audit Committee along with Mayor Lasif, and can say that we have met on a number of occasions and I think diligently gone through a work program that has included things like the financial statements, the management of security on minor assets, asset protection updates, looking at the VAGO external audit strategy, the provision of internal audit services and borrowing policy. So those are some of the sorts of issues that we've looked at on the Audit Committee. The documentation is there for people to have a read of, but I recommend that we note those as per the agenda.
Thank you. Councillor McCarthy?
I have nothing to add.
Any further comments from anyone else? No? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Motion is carried. Item 12, records of assemblies of councillors. 12.1, assemblies of councillors held. Moved by Councillor Greco, seconded by Councillor McCarthy. All those in favour? Motion is carried. Item 13, reports by Mayor and councillors. They are in front of you. Moved by Councillor Messina, seconded by Councillor Rennie. All those in favour? Motion is carried.
Mayor, before you move to the next item, I'd like to propose a suspension of standing orders.
Okay.
Move that.
Okay. Move. Then you... I think you need to say why, is what...
To make a statement to council.
It's up to the council to resolve in that way. So there's a motion to suspend standing orders by Councillor McCarthy. Seconded by Councillor Messina. All those in favour? Motion is carried. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry to catch you unawares there. But you would have said no if I had asked you prior. I just wanted to note that this is the last ordinary council meeting of council before we have our special council meeting where we go through the process of electing mayor and deputy mayor and the like. And so I wanted to take this opportunity to thank you, Councillor Lasif, for your wonderful work this year and, of course, also in the previous year in the role of mayor. It has been a very challenging and busy time for this council, and you've done an extraordinary job in the chair and, of course, throughout the week and throughout the year. And I want to say a special thanks to you on behalf of other councillors, and hopefully other councillors will have similar things to share. But one of the practices that we have had in this chamber in the past is at the last ordinary meeting, just to bring other councillors up to speed, before the special meeting we would usually acknowledge our mayor. You happen to do 2 years in the chair, which some people would say is being a sucker for punishment, the ultimate masochism, but I think it's extraordinary service, and it has been a transformative year and 2 years, and you've led that process with courage, conviction, and you've made myself and I think many, many people in our community extraordinarily proud, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. That was very unexpected. Councillor Rennie.
I'll keep this brief because if we all speak for our usual 3 minutes, we'll be here. We'll need all that 30 minutes. But I would just like to say that I think you've set the bar very high in terms of what our community and what our council can expect from a mayor, and I thank you for that. And I thank you for your leadership and your courage at times in the role as mayor. So,
thank you. Councillor Rennie.
I'll be quick as well. In the election of mayor, I remember thinking about the kind of mayor that Durban needed, and in a time of instability and uncertainty in the global and national scale, it's been wonderful to have you as the mayor, as someone who is calm and smart and notices the details, as well as having the big picture vision. And I guess in trying to be a better councillor, I often think that I try to be more like you, and that's been great to have people that you can look up to.
Thanks. Councillor Sanders.
I just want to say it's been an amazing year, but you've had double year. A manager manages, a leader empowers and promotes and resonates in terms of their congruencies in their actions and what their beliefs are. And my favourite word is evolution. And I think what this council has done, that it's been led by you, is gone through an evolutionary process where you stand firm and you actually pass on your passion and your outcomes based on the community and the municipality. And it's been a pleasure to stand beside you for the year. And I know we've had many conversations and many breakfasts. It's going to be a little bit different. I'm going to get teary now. But when I think of women in leadership, and if somebody stops me in the street, they'll say to me, oh, you know, it's Councillor Surf, it's the mayor. And people have come up to me and said, well, what's it going to be like after the 26th of November? And I'm going to say, well, we evolve, we go on. But it's been a pleasure to watch you empower me and watch you grow throughout this community and bring the community with you and bring the council with you. And it's been a pleasure. Thank you for being our mayor, Kim, for 2 years.
Thanks. Okay.
I'll move a motion that we resume standing orders.
Can I just say something or not?
Yeah, okay, I'll take that back.
We do it again, but...
All I want to say thank you. That was unexpected. And I took on the role as mayor not knowing what I was getting myself into because I had just been elected a councillor. But I guess I've just tried to stay true to my values and true to the community that voted me in. And I know that when we came onto council, we walked into a bit of a challenge in terms of the culture and the organisation. I think that together that we've been able to shift that in a positive way, and I've really enjoyed the last 2 years, and I'm sad that it's coming to an end, but kind of a little bit happy because I will have time for my family again. Well, more time than I do now. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
We didn't get a chance to.
Okay, Councillor Greco.
I know often we're not on the same side, but that doesn't mean that we can't say some nice words, you know.
Thank you.
Look, first of all, I must say that, you know, your 2 years, you stepped into the job just after being elected, and I think you've done a wonderful job in terms of you've fully appreciated the enormity of the task, and you've really thrown yourself into it, and that has to be commended and has to be acknowledged. I also say that given your experience in local government by working with the Melbourne City Council, that puts you in a good stead in terms of understanding the complexity of local government and also understanding the transformation which was needed here at the City of Durban and trying to seek improvements. I know we've been on opposite sides on many occasions, but that doesn't mean I don't I don't have respect for you as a person. Obviously, it's always it's a contest of ideas in terms of our various political positions and sometimes even our philosophical outlook and in relation to issues that we have. And I understand and I appreciate that sometimes that can become quite conflictual, and we're human beings and those sort of things. That's part of the magic, if you like, and part of the colour of being who we are. But I think you've handled it well. Maybe sometimes I haven't been really happy about it, but that's how the game is played. So congratulations on your 2 years. And from what I can sense, I think that maybe you're not going for your third term, so I just wonder where you'll be sitting, whether you actually be sitting next to me or opposite me or somewhere. And I'm sure we're going to have a lot of debates, and there'll be a lot of interesting sparring, which I'm looking forward to, and I'm sure that you would be looking forward to.
I know.
Thank you.
I haven't actually participated properly in a debate, which will be interesting.
I'll say something too.
Councillor
No, congratulations. The last 2 years, as previous councillor have said, that you've come on council straight into the role of being mayor. Yes, you've had experience of local government, but nobody ever gives you the experience of what mayoralty is all about and the responsibility that comes with it, because you are ultimately, at the end of the day, you are the head of council and the spokesperson, and obviously the insight that you get from a mayor's point of view, that all the confidential items and matters that come to council, they ultimately come to you first. So you do get exposed somewhat to a lot of issues and concerns and, you know, and debates and you know, journalism that come at you and wanting answers and things like that. So it does come with a huge responsibility. But on top of that, you've had a huge sacrifice for your family, because I know you have a very, very young family. And from my personal perspective, I could never have done it, having such a young family, where I feel that it takes a huge commitment and sacrifice, and sometimes it can come at a sacrifice where it affects many relationships and many people that you're are personally touched by. In saying that, 2 years, that's a long time, especially 2 years in a row. I've seen previous councillors that have taken on mayoralty and 1 year, and the withdrawal symptoms that they have after 1 year. Let's see how you cope with your withdrawal symptoms after 2. So anyway, congratulations. You've composed yourself very well, especially with situations when we've had some difficult times, especially with people in the gallery. And I know that you've kept your cool, and which has been a great representative for, I guess, as a footing for new councillors of what a mayor should be like or act like or consider. You've got to keep yourself calm at all situations. It's very easy to lose your cool, especially when you have people like we've had this evening in the gallery. I won't mention any names. And it's very hard when they can really get under your skin and they keep at you and at you and at you. So I do take my hat off to your maturity in that aspect, because I think that's really important for whoever becomes mayor next time, that it is a high level to and it's easy to lose your cool no matter where you are, but I think that you have shown a huge maturity, as not only as a female but as a person, but definitely as a mayor, because being the council spokesperson, you've certainly put a standard there for the next mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. We can resume standing orders.
We'll now move a motion that we resume standing orders.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Seconded by Councillor Amir. All those in favour? Motion is carried.
We note that that's unanimous.
We could. Item 14, reports considered confidential. There are none, so we'll close the meeting now at 10:05. Lucky we extended the meeting. Thank you, everybody.